Greetings, everyone. This is Monkey D. FIC. Prepare yourselves for What if Luffy got Goku's power? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Fruit of Another World. The island had no name on any chart Nami owned. That alone should have been enough to make them sail past it, keep the thousand sunny pointed toward the next dot on the log pose, and leave the nameless rock to whatever silence it had been keeping. Nami had said exactly that, loudly, with her finger jabbing at the map and her orange hair whipping in the salt wind. She'd made a very reasonable case. A thorough case. Possibly her best case yet. Luffy had already jumped off the figurehead by the time she finished talking. He hit the water with a massive splash, bobbed to the surface immediately. Rubber and seawater had a complicated relationship, mostly involving him refusing to sink at a reasonable rate, and started paddling toward the shore with both arms windmilling like he was in a race with himself. Land! He bellowed, because he always bellowed it, because every island was the first island he'd ever seen and probably the best one. Nami pressed her fingers to her temple. Someone fish him out. He'll float back eventually, Zoro said from where he was sleeping against the mast, not opening his eyes. Nobody fished him out. The island was small and dense with jungle, the kind that grew like it had an argument to make, thick roots pushing up through dark soil, canopies so heavy the light came through green filtered and dim, everything damp in a way that had nothing to do with recent rain and everything to do with age. The place felt old. Not ruins old, not history old, but something deeper. The way certain silences feel like they've been there longer than the things making noise around them. Luffy didn't notice any of that. He was looking for food. Meat, he said to a passing bird, which fled. Meat, he informed a cluster of mushrooms, which he then kicked over to see if anything was hiding under them. Nothing was. He ate one of the mushrooms anyway, decided it tasted like wet bark, and kept walking. The rest of the crew had followed him ashore by now, Nami because she was responsible and hated herself for it, Zoro because he'd woken up and decided sleeping on the ship was the same as sleeping anywhere, Usopp and Chopper because those two were constitutionally incapable of letting Luffy wander alone. Robin because she was curious about the feeling of the place, and kept touching the bark of trees with a scholar's particular kind of attention, Sanji because he'd spotted potential herbs from the shore, and Frankie because he'd said, super, and started walking before anyone asked. Brook had stayed on the ship. He'd felt something from the island, he said, and preferred to feel it from a distance. Nobody argued with Brook about feelings. The man had been dead for 50 years. He'd earned the right to trust his instincts. They spread out the way they always did, casually, no real formation, just people wandering in roughly the same direction, until Luffy stopped. He stopped so abruptly that Chopper walked into his back and bounced off. What? Usopp said, immediately gripping his slingshot. What is it? Is it something huge? Is it huge and angry? Are those the only two options? Because those are always the only two options. Someone's there, Luffy said. His voice was different. Still Luffy, still round at the edges, still carrying that particular warmth that never really went away, but quieter. He was looking at a gap between two trees where the green light pooled and the shadows went deep, and he wasn't moving. Zoro had his hand on Wado Ikemanji. Robin had opened her eyes a little wider. Nami held her climb attack like she was ready to use it, and was already calculating whether they could retreat to the ship before whatever was in those shadows decided to come out. Whatever was in the shadows decided to come out. It fell more than stepped, a controlled collapse, one hand catching a root, the other pressed flat against the wound at its side that had stopped bleeding not because it had healed but because there wasn't much blood left to bleed. The figure was large. Impossibly large for something moving this quietly. Taller than Frankie, broader through the shoulders than anyone on the crew, wrapped in clothing that might have been a fighting GI at some point before whatever had happened to it. The cloth was destroyed. Not cut, not burned, but unmade, like something had hit it with force so absolute the fabric had simply given up the concept of being fabric. The figure raised its head. The face was human. Broadly. There was something about the eyes, not the color, which was ordinary black, but the quality of them, like they'd seen a depth of distance that ordinary human eyes weren't designed to process. The hair was wild black, going in every direction gravity was supposed to prevent. There was a tail. A brown, furred, prehensile tail, wrapped loosely around the figure's waist like a belt. Usopp made a very small sound. "He's hurt," Chopper said, and was already moving before anyone else had registered what was happening, his small hooves hitting the soil as he shifted through his walking point and crossed the distance with his medical bag already open. The figure looked at Chopper. Something in its expression changed, not softened, exactly, but recognized. Like it knew what kindness looked like and was surprised to find it here. "Don't," it started, in a voice that came out of it like boulders moving. "Don't waste your supplies. It's not that kind of wound." Chopper stopped. He looked at the wound. He was a doctor, and doctors see things that other people see as wounds and recognize as something categorically different. He looked at the figure's side, and he went very still. "What happened to you?" Luffy asked. He was crouched now, hands on his knees, looking at the figure with the focused attention he only gave to things he decided mattered. Luffy decided things mattered faster than anyone Nami had ever met. It was terrifying and also, occasionally, exactly what the situation needed. "I fought something I couldn't beat," the figure said. Simply. Without shame. "First time in a long time." "Who?" The figure almost smiled. "Something you don't need a name for. Something that won't come here." A pause. The hand at its side tightened slightly. "I made sure of that." Luffy looked at the figure for another moment. Then he sat down cross-legged on the jungle floor like they were about to have lunch together. "Then you're safe," he said. "That's good. What's your name?" The other stared at him. Nami opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then just pinched the bridge of her nose and said nothing because what was there to say? The figure was quiet for a moment. When it answered, it sounded like it was remembering something it had set down a long time ago, and was surprised to find still fit in its hand. "Cayenne," it said. "My name is Cayenne." They made a camp because Luffy decided they were making a camp. That was how most decisions happened. Sanji built a fire without being asked because the figure, Cayenne, was shivering in a way that didn't match the warmth of the evening, the deep involuntary shiver of a body using its last reserves. Chopper hovered with increasingly frustrated helplessness because the wounds weren't responding to anything in his kit, and he'd started saying things under his breath in a sharp, continuous mutter that meant he was thinking very hard and didn't like what he was thinking. Luffy sat across the fire from Cayenne and ate an enormous amount of whatever Sanji put in front of him, which was several things at once, and watched the large man with the patient attentiveness of someone who has all the time in the world and isn't in any hurry to pretend otherwise. "You're a pirate," Cayenne said. Not an accusation. An observation. "Yep," Luffy said, around a mouthful of rice. "I'm going to be king of the pirates." "Ah." Another pause. "You say that like you already are." "I say it like I'm going to be." Luffy swallowed. "There's a difference." Cayenne studied him. The fire did things to his face, brought out the angles, the exhaustion, and underneath both of those things something that looked like it might have been relief if relief were an ocean and Cayenne were standing at its edge and seeing it for the first time in years. "What are you?" Nami asked. She was sitting slightly behind Luffy, cross-legged, her climb tacked across her knees. Direct, but she'd waited until she thought asking wouldn't spook him. She was usually good at that. "A Saiyan," Cayenne said. "What's a Saiyan?" Usopp asked. "Warriors." Cayenne flexed the hand at his side, slowly, like he was checking it was still there. "A race of warriors. We were born fighting. It's in our blood." He glanced at his tail. "You could call us a kind of people who grew up in a universe where the only language everyone spoke fluently was strength." Robin tilted her head. "Were," she said quietly. Cayenne met her eyes. Robin was, as always, impossible to startle, and she held his gaze without flinching. "Were," he confirmed. "There are very few of us left. Scattered. Wandering. The fire popped. I ended up here. In this sea. In this world. A pause that held a particular weight. I've been here a long time. How long? Chopper asked, because Chopper always asked the questions that sounded childlike and were actually the most important ones. Long enough to eat one of your devil fruits, Saiyan said. Long enough to put something inside one that I needed to give away before. He stopped. Breathed. The firelight caught something in his eyes that looked like it was almost done burning. Before I couldn't anymore. The camp went quiet. Not the heavy quiet of threat or tension, but the particular quiet that settles when something real is being said and everyone in earshot knows it. Luffy wasn't eating anymore. He was watching Saiyan with those eyes, the ones that looked like they saw straight through the outside of things and found the actual shape underneath. He'd looked at Whitebird like that once, Nami had heard. She believed it. Saiyan reached inside what remained of his clothing and drew out a fruit. It was extraordinary without being showy about it. Roughly pear-shaped, deep blue-black shifting to violet at the edges in the firelight, covered in the distinctive spiral patterns of a devil fruit with a particular quality to those spirals. They moved. Not drastically. Not in a way you could track if you stared at them. But if you looked away and looked back, they were different. Like they were breathing. I spent 20 years putting what I am into this fruit, Saiyan said. Saiyan blood, Saiyan potential, Saiyan fire. He turned it over in his palm. Not my memories. Not my past. Just the engine. The thing that makes us grow. He paused. The thing that makes us never stop growing, no matter what tries to stop us. That sounds like a devil fruit that would make someone completely terrifying, Robin said pleasantly. Yes, Saiyan agreed, with what might have been the ghost of a smile. It would. He looked at Luffy. Luffy looked back at him. You already ate a devil fruit, Saiyan said. It wasn't a question. He could probably feel it. Saiyans were sensitive to certain things, and power was first among them. Goma Goma no Mi, Luffy said. I'm rubber. Saiyan turned the fruit over again. I've been watching the sea for a long time. Watching people. Looking for the right person. Another breath. This one cost him something. The fruit won't merge with just anyone. It needs someone whose nature already resonates with what's inside it. He looked at Luffy steadily. Do you know what the Saiyan engine fundamentally is? At its core? No, Luffy said honestly. It's the refusal to stay the same, Saiyan said. The absolute refusal, written into the body itself, to be defeated and remain defeated. Saiyans get stronger from every battle. Every wound makes the next version of us that survives it more than what we were before. He held the fruit out. I've been looking for someone who is already like that. Who fights not for power but because fighting is how they live. Who loses and gets back up so naturally it never occurs to them that they were supposed to stay down. Luffy stared at the fruit. The spirals breathed. I'm going to be honest, Luffy said. I wasn't planning on eating another devil fruit. Luffy. Nami started. But, Luffy continued, you've been looking for me for a long time, right? Even if you didn't know it was me. He grinned. Not the wide, face-splitting grin he used in fights, but a smaller one. Real. I don't really believe in that word. Supposed. Like supposed to stay down, supposed to lose, supposed to have limits. He reached out and took the fruit from Saiyan's palm with the casual ease of someone accepting something they'd always been going to accept. I'll carry it. Whatever you put in there. I'll make it mine. Saiyan looked at him for a long moment. Then he let out a breath that sounded like it had been waiting somewhere deep in his chest for years and years and years. I know, Saiyan said. That's why I waited. Luffy bit into it. Devil fruits tasted terrible. This was a constant. They all tasted like they'd been soaked in salt water and disappointment, and then dried in the sun for several weeks. The Gomu Gomu no Mi had tasted, according to Luffy's own historical account, like a rubber tire that had fallen in the ocean. He'd been 7 and he'd eaten it anyway without really meaning to, which was pretty on brand. The Saiyan no Mi tasted like lightning. Not metaphorically. Not like lightning as in sharp or electric or striking. It tasted like the actual physical phenomenon of lightning, like ozone and heat and the split second of atmospheric violence that happened when a charge decided it had been building long enough. Luffy swallowed it, and his entire body went rigid for one heartbeat, 2, 3, then he exhaled and looked completely normal. That tasted terrible, he announced. Luffy. Chopper had both hooves on his shoulders. How do you feel? Any tingling? Any weird internal pressure? Is your heart beating faster? Luffy, focus, this is medically important. I feel fine, Luffy said. He rotated one arm experimentally. Rubber still. He poked himself in the cheek. Rubber. He let go, watched the cheek bounce back, nodded. Same as always. Chopper did not look reassured. Chopper looked like he was mentally composing a very long medical document, and none of the entries in it were comfortable. Saiyan watched this from across the fire. His eyes were half closed now. Something had left him with the fruit, some last tension, some held thread. He looked lighter. Also significantly worse. It won't happen right away, he said. It needs something to wake it up. A fight. He paused. A real one. Those happen to us a lot, Nami said somewhat bleakly. I know. Saiyan shifted. Something in his breathing had changed. I watched your crew for a while, from a distance. You fight like a family. A pause that held something like warmth. That's rare. Most people with power fight alone. That's because they're idiots, Luffy said simply. Saiyan made the sound that was almost a laugh. It didn't get all the way there, but it tried. The night deepened. The jungle made its nighttime sounds, insects, distant birds, the settling breath of old trees. The fire burned low. One by one the crew found places to sleep, Sanji taking first watch with a cigarette burning down to nothing in the corner of his mouth, his eyes moving between the tree-line and Saiyan with the particular alertness of a man who was cooking a complicated feeling into something manageable. Luffy didn't sleep. He sat by the fire and he felt the thing inside him that was new, that didn't have a shape yet, that breathed when he breathed and was quiet when he was quiet, and he didn't try to poke at it or examine it. He just let it exist. He was good at that. Most people couldn't let something exist without immediately needing to understand it. Luffy could hold the unknown without flinching. Saiyan was still awake too. Hey, Luffy said quietly. Did you have a crew? A pause. The fire crackled. Yes, Saiyan said. A long time ago. What happened to them? Saiyan was quiet for long enough that Luffy thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, I protected them. For a long time, I protected them. He shifted again. And then there was something I couldn't protect them from, and I couldn't forgive myself, and I came here. His eyes were fully closed now. I've been trying to forgive myself for a long time. Did it work? Luffy asked. The corner of Saiyan's mouth moved. Ask me when you're stronger than I was, he said. And you will be. I made sure of that. Luffy looked at him for a moment. Go to sleep, Luffy said. You're safe here. He meant it the way he meant everything, completely, without reservation, as a simple statement of fact. Saiyan's breathing evened out. Slowed. Something in his face that had been held tense, maybe for years, let go. Sanji appeared behind Luffy's shoulder, cigarette replaced with a fresh one. He looked at Saiyan. Then he looked at the back of Luffy's head. He didn't say anything. He put a hand on Luffy's shoulder for exactly 1 second, squeezed, and went back to his watch. The Marine fleet arrived at dawn. 6 ships. Not the largest Luffy had seen. Marineford had been a different country of violence. But 6 was 6, and they'd come around the island's eastern cape in a formation that meant they'd known roughly where to look, which meant someone had told them, which meant this little nameless island had eyes on it from somewhere. The Sunny's alarm, Frankie's customized, entirely too loud alarm, went off like a cannon at roughly the same time Usopp shouted from the tree-line where he'd taken up a perch during the night. Ships! 6 of them! I count at least 400 men, and there's a vice admiral flag on the lead ship. I want to go on record as saying I knew this island was bad news. The camp came alive in about 4 seconds. That was actually slower than normal. Usually it was 3, but Nami stopped to grab the log pose and Chopper had to put his medical bag away properly because he was a professional. Zoro had both swords out before he'd fully woken up. That was normal. His body had its own security system. Luffy was standing at the tree line when the first cannon shot crossed the sky overhead and hit the jungle behind them. The explosion sent birds shrieking out of the canopy in every direction. He watched the smoke rise and turned back to look at the ships. How'd they know we were here? Usopp demanded, landing next to him. They weren't looking for us, Robin said. She was looking toward the ships with the quality of stillness that meant she was already a step ahead of the conversation. They were looking for him. Kion was standing at the edge of the trees. He'd slept, but sleep had given him something like energy, the way a candle gives a room something like warmth, real, but finite, and burning down. His tail moved slowly. I've been keeping them away from this island for 2 years, he said. I suppose. He looked at his hands. I suppose I've stopped being able to do that. What do they want with you? Nami asked. What they want with anything they don't understand and can't control. He straightened. They want to study me. Contain me. His eyes went flat and absolutely empty of anything soft. I don't intend to let them do that. Not to me and not to whoever ends up with what I put in that fruit. A second cannon shot. Closer. The lead ship was moving in fast, the vice admiral's flag snapping in the morning wind. Luffy cracked his knuckles. The sound was enormous, not because knuckles are loud, but because Luffy put something into it, an emphasis, a punctuation mark on a decision that had already been made. He started walking toward the shore. Luffy, Nami said. 6 ships. 400 men. Vice Admiral. Yep, Luffy said. We should have a strategy. I'm the strategy, he said, and he was already at the waterline. The Thousand Sunny had moved. Frankie had gotten her underway, keeping her out of direct cannon range and maneuvering with the aggression of a man who was also very fond of his ship and disliked people shooting at it. The 6 marine ships were arranging themselves in a loose arc standard encirclement. Cut off the escape routes, then close in. On the deck of the lead ship, a vice admiral stood at the railing in the early light. He was broad, serious-faced, the kind of career marine who had worked his way up through genuine ability rather than politics, and who looked at problems with the methodical patience of someone who had solved a lot of problems. His name was Tashiro. He'd been stationed at this grid of the New World for 8 months. He'd spent most of those 8 months watching an island that shouldn't exist on any chart, trying to get close enough to learn what was on it. He was not expecting what he saw. One person standing at the shoreline. Yum. Straw hat. Scar on his cheek. Arms hanging loose at his sides. That's... His adjutant started. Straw Hat Luffy, Tashiro said. Yes. He took a breath. He was aware that this development significantly complicated the situation. The intelligence on the island's occupant had not included any mention of Straw Hat Luffy. Deploy the first wave. Halt the advance until I understand what we're dealing with. The first wave hit the shore, 100 men, trained, organized, armed with rifles and swords and the particular confidence of Marines who had numbers on their side. They fanned out along the waterline in a crescent, cutting off the figure on the shore from any direction of retreat. Luffy looked at them. Oh hey, he said. A lot of guys. He stretched one arm behind him, the rubber going long and loose and easy as rope, then snapped it forward. Gum Gum pistol. The punch hit the center of the formation like a cannon shot. 10 Marines went down from the impact, and the cascading shockwave through their ranks threw another 15 off their feet. The rubber arms snapped back. Luffy hadn't moved. The formation broke and reassembled. These were trained men. They didn't rout from a single hit. But then something happened. Luffy exhaled. A long, slow exhale, like he was breathing out something that had been sitting in his chest since the night before, since he'd swallowed that fruit and felt the lightning go down. When he inhaled again, the air around him moved. Not wind, not a physical displacement. Something else. Something that traveled through the visible world without disturbing it, like a current moving beneath still water. The Marines closest to him stopped. Not from fear. Not exactly. Their bodies just stopped. Like the command from their brain to their feet had encountered something in the air between intention and action and couldn't quite push through it. Hockey. Luffy had always had it. Conqueror's hockey had been in him since he was born, dormant until Marineford had beaten it out of him with grief and desperation. He'd trained it. Mastered it, as much as something like that could be mastered, which was to say he'd made it into something that belonged to him rather than something that happened to him. But this was different. This was hockey and something else, the Saiyan energy in his blood, waking up now, responding to the first smell of real battle the way an ember responds to wind. It wasn't much yet. It was a kindling stage, a first flickering. But the Marines near him felt it like standing next to an open furnace, and several of them stepped back without deciding to. Luffy looked at his own hands. His palms were glowing faintly. Actually glowing, a pale gold light, like sunlight filtered through shallow water, crackling at his knuckles where the hockey gathered. "Oh," he said. "That's new." The vice admiral on the lead ship had been watching through a spyglass. He lowered it. His expression was unreadable in the way that very disciplined people's expressions go unreadable when what they're seeing needs to be processed for a while before it can be responded to. "All ships," he said. "Full assault. Now." The Straw Hats had spent years learning to fight in chaos as comfortably as they fought in open space. Zoro was already on the shore, 3 swords meeting the second wave of Marines with a precision and violence that looked elegant from a distance and was absolutely terrifying up close. Sanji came off the Sunny's rail in a kick that crossed 50 feet of air and hit the bow of a flanking ship hard enough to spin it sideways in the water. Frankie had General Frankie mid-deployment, the mech rising from the Sunny's deck with the grinding, wonderful sound of a man who had built something enormous and liked using it. Usopp was in a tree, shooting, calling every shot in advance with the absolute confidence that comes from being genuinely excellent at exactly one thing. Nami was on the Sunny directing weather with the climate act, pulling clouds together with the efficient ferocity of someone who was still annoyed about not being consulted on the decision to engage. Robin had both hands blooming across 3 ships simultaneously, grabbing weapon hands and pulling them down, grabbing collars and heaving their owners overboard with the detached economy of motion that was her particular brand of terrifying. Chopper was at Kyan's side. Not fighting, keeping the man upright. Kyan was fighting too, or trying to, the way a fire tries when it's down to coals. He was still formidable. A single swing of one arm sent a cluster of Marines off their feet. But he was burning the last of it, and everyone watching could see it. Luffy took 5 steps into the water and then pushed off, stretching both arms sideways to hit the hulls of the 2 nearest ships simultaneously. The impact cracked timber. He snapped back to shore, landed, and the gold light at his hands was brighter now, not dramatically, not world-endingly, but noticeably. Continuously. Like something had decided to stay lit. He could feel it. The thing Kyan had put in the fruit. It wasn't instructions. It wasn't technique or knowledge or history. It was exactly what Kyan had said, an engine. A gear turning. And with every punch, every snap of rubber, every impact absorbed and returned, it turned a little faster. He was getting stronger. Not later. Now. Between the first punch and the 5th, he was already different from who he'd been at the first. The feeling was extraordinary. Not comfortable. It was too hot for comfortable. Too pressured, like his blood was trying to expand into space his body wasn't sure it had yet. But extraordinary. Like standing at the top of a mountain where the air is thin and clean and goes on forever in every direction. He laughed. He couldn't help it. He laughed the way he always did when something was this real, this good, this completely and undeniably the thing that was happening right now, and the laugh carried across the water to the marine ships, and several Marines heard it, and felt, without being able to explain why, deeply uncertain about continuing. Taishiro heard it too. He recognized it. He'd read the reports from Marineford, from Dressrosa, from Ueno. He knew what that laugh meant. Fall back, he said. Sir? Fall back. Signal a retreat. He folded his spyglass. This isn't a battle we win today. We have 6 ships. He's fall back, Taishiro said again, quietly, with the certainty of a man who knows when he's seen something that needs to be reported rather than fought. Now. The ships pulled back. Not routed, disciplined, organized, the way Marines retreated when it was a tactical choice rather than a defeat. It still felt like a defeat. The Marines on the shore who'd been taken down were collected by their fellows, pulled back to the launches, brought aboard. The whole operation took 20 minutes. Luffy stood on the shore and watched them go. The gold light had faded from his hands, but he could still feel the residual warmth of it in his bones, not like the heat of exertion, but like sunlight that had soaked in and stayed. Something had opened. A door, maybe, or maybe not a door but an eye, something that had been shut and was now open and would not close again. Zoro appeared next to him, sheathing Wado Ikimonji with the particular crisp motion that meant he was done fighting and was categorizing what had happened. Your hands were glowing, Zoro said. Yeah. And they hit harder than before. Yeah. Zoro was quiet for a moment, looking out at the retreating ships. Good, he said, and walked away. That was Zoro's version of an extensive emotional response. Nami came next. She didn't say anything about the light, or the hitting harder or any of it. She grabbed his arm, both hands tight, and said, Don't do that without telling me first. She meant charge in alone. She meant make the decision without the crew. She meant stop making her watch from a distance while something happened to him that she couldn't put a map to. Sorry, Luffy said. She let go. Rubbed her face. Looked at him sideways. Are you okay? I feel amazing, he said honestly, the way he always said things that were honest, without decoration, without softening, just the fact of it. Nami looked at him for a long moment. Then she let out a breath and said, Of course you do, and walked back up the beach. Chopper was kneeling next to Kyan. Luffy crossed the sand to them. Kyan was sitting against a driftwood log now, and the specific quality of his exhaustion had deepened, not the exhaustion of a long day but the exhaustion of a long something, a long span of holding on to something and finally putting it down. The fruit is awake, Kyan said. He was looking at Luffy's hands. Yeah. Luffy crouched. Will it keep doing that? Getting stronger in fights? Every real battle. Every time you're pushed and pushed back. Kyan's eyes were distant. It has no ceiling. That's the nature of Saiyan blood. Every ceiling it hits, it breaks, and the next one is higher. He paused. You'll find the limits strange. Not walls. More like. He searched for the word. Skins. Things to shed. Luffy nodded slowly. Hey, he said. You can come with us, you know. If you want. Kyan looked at him. Something moved through his face, complex, layered, the expression of someone who is being offered something they thought was no longer possible, and is trying to figure out how real the offer is, and what it would cost to accept. I think, Kyan said very carefully, that this island is where I'm going to stay. Luffy looked at him. He could read the shape of what Kyan wasn't saying, the weight of it, the reasoning, the particular piece of a man who has been running and has found the place where the running ends. Okay, Luffy said. Chopper was crying. Small, quiet, doctor-professional crying, which meant his nose was running and he was sniffling in a highly controlled manner. Hey, Kyan, Luffy said. The large man looked at him. Thank you, Luffy said. Simply. Without ceremony. Kyan closed his eyes. Don't waste it, he said. Don't be afraid of it. He exhaled slowly, and the exhale had the finality of a door closing gently rather than slamming. And don't ever stop moving forward. Luffy stood. He put his hat back on. It had fallen off during the fight and he'd somehow caught it without thinking, which was automatic now, the hat going back where it belonged as naturally as his arms snapping back to their usual length. He looked out at the sea. It was morning now, the full gold of it, the kind of morning that felt like a statement. The thousand sunny was coming back around the southern cape, Frankie bringing her in with the easy confidence of the best shipwright in the New World. Luffy felt the engine in his chest, quiet now, but there. Turning. He smiled. Let's go, he said. They left Cayenne on his island. The island with no name. The one that wasn't on any chart. By the time the Sunny cleared the eastern cape and caught the trade wind, Luffy was sitting on the figurehead with his feet hanging over the prow, watching the water, and feeling, for the first time in a long time, like the world ahead was bigger than the world behind. Not more dangerous. More possible. He felt the first real pulse of the Saiyan energy run through him. Clean and deep and absolutely without limit. He was still Luffy. He just wasn't only Luffy anymore. The sea opened up ahead of them, wide, blue, endless, full of everything they hadn't found yet, and the thousand Sunny rode it like she was born to. Chapter 2, The Weight of a Star. 3 days out from the nameless island, Luffy broke the ocean. Not literally. The ocean remained intact, continuing its general business of being enormous and wet and indifferent to pirates. What Luffy broke was the surface of the water about 60 feet off the Sunny starboard side, and he did it by punching it. He'd been hanging off the figurehead by one ankle, arms stretched back, and he let fly with enough force that the impact sent a column of white water 20 feet into the air and left a temporary crater in the sea's surface. A brief, impossible bowl shape that the ocean filled in immediately, offended by the presumption. Luffy watched the water settle. Huh, he said. He'd been doing this for 3 days. Not constantly. He slept, he ate catastrophic amounts of food, he annoyed Sanji, he had a 40-minute argument with Usopp about whether a particular cloud looked more like a bear or a frog. It looked like neither, it looked like a cloud. Nami told them both this and was ignored. But whenever there was a spare moment, and a spare stretch of sky or water, Luffy was testing things. Quietly, by his standards. Methodically, by no standards at all. The gold light came easier now. It didn't require a fight to surface. It came when he reached for it, like a muscle that had always been there but hadn't known what it was for until someone told it. He could push it into his punches, feel them land differently. Heavier. With a concussive quality that wasn't rubber and wasn't hockey but lived somewhere in the space between both, amplifying them the way a resonant chamber amplifies sound. He still had no real idea what he was doing. That had never stopped him. You're going to exhaust yourself before anything worth fighting shows up, Zoro said from behind him. Luffy twisted around, one ankle still hooked on the figurehead, so he was looking at Zoro upside down. Zoro was standing on the deck with his arms crossed, watching, with the expression he used when he was paying close attention and didn't want anyone to notice. I'm not exhausted, Luffy said. Not yet. I don't get exhausted the same way now. Luffy said it like he was reporting the weather. Like I get tired. But then I feel it kick, that thing from the fruit, and it's like I ate a big meal. Goes away fast. Zoro's expression didn't change. But something behind it shifted. How fast? He asked. Luffy thought about it. Scratched the back of his neck. Like middle of a fight fast. If someone's actually pushing me, it's almost instant. Zoro was quiet for a moment. Show me, he said. Luffy looked at him. Then he grinned, not the reflex grin, but the real one, the one that started slow and arrived like a sunrise. He unwrapped his ankle from the figurehead, dropped to the deck, and rolled his shoulders. You sure? He said. Zoro had already drawn Wado Ikemanji. Just the one sword. He held it loose, point low, with the posture of someone who has assessed the situation and is planning to learn from it rather than win it. Don't hold back, Zoro said. I'll know if you do. he would. That was the thing about Zoro. He could feel the difference between someone going all out and someone pulling their punches the way a musician can feel whether another musician is actually playing or just going through the motions. It was a sensitivity built from years of training so savage that most people's bodies would have written strongly worded letters about the working conditions. Luffy came in fast. Not his fastest. He was feeling it out, finding the shape of a spar between himself and Zoro with this new component in the equation. He threw a jab. Zoro deflected it. The impact rattled up the blade and Zoro's brow went up by about a millimeter, which was the Zoro equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. Luffy felt the engine tick up a notch. Just the one exchange, one deflection, one absorbed impact, and already his blood was warmer. He could feel it turning, the thing Kyan had described, the engine cycling through its first gear. He came in again. Faster. They went back and forth across the deck for 10 minutes. Nami watched from the upper deck, arms folded, whether I'm moving between them and the horizon with the equal opportunity wariness of someone who found both equally capable of causing disaster. Usopp had climbed the crow's nest to watch from above and was providing a running commentary to Chopper that nobody had asked for and everyone could hear anyway. Zoro just blocked that with his wrist, Chopper. I've never seen anyone block anything with their wrist. That's called a parry with the guard. And Luffy is glowing again. Chopper, he's doing the glowing thing. Sanji came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over one shoulder and watched for exactly 30 seconds before going back inside without comment. He emerged 2 minutes later with a plate of food and set it on the deck railing without saying anything and went back inside again. It was for after the spar. Everyone knew this. It was Sanji's way of acknowledging something mattered without using words. The 10th exchange was different from the others. Luffy threw a right hook with the gold light full in his fist. Zoro brought Wado up in a block that should have held. It was good swordsmanship, perfect geometry, the right angle to redirect rather than absorb, and the impact hit it and pushed through. Not by much. A fraction. But Zoro's feet moved. Actually moved, scraping back an inch across the Sunny's deck. Zoro looked at his own feet. Then he looked at Luffy. Luffy had stopped. The glow had faded. He was looking at Zoro with an expression that wasn't quite apology. Luffy didn't really do apology, but was something adjacent, a checking in. Are you okay? You asked for this, but I want to make sure you're actually okay. Zoro sheathed his sword. Again tomorrow, he said. Yeah? Luffy said. Yeah. Zoro met his eyes. Something was exchanged in that look, something that didn't need language and would have been made smaller by it. An acknowledgement between two people who had fought alongside each other for years and knew each other's strength as well as they knew their own, confronting the fact that one of them had just changed the parameters of everything. Zoro picked up the plates Sanji had left and walked back toward the mast. You're still slower than you should be, he said without turning around. You're still not as strong as you want to be, Luffy replied. Zoro sat down against the mast, picked up his food, and started eating. His eyes were already distant, already somewhere inside himself where the new benchmark was being measured and the training adjustments were being calculated with the ruthless precision of a man who had decided he was going to be the world's greatest swordsman, and treated every piece of evidence about his current distance from that goal as useful rather than discouraging. Luffy watched him for a second. Then he stole half the food off his plate and ran. Zoro's shout followed him all the way to the figurehead. In the bowels of Marineford, which was no longer called Marineford, the name had been changed after the war to something more formal and governmental, though most people still used the old name out of habit. A meeting was happening in a room that didn't appear on any floor plan. The room was circular and lit by something other than windows, which it didn't have. The men around the table wore coats that indicated their rank. The man at the head of it wore green and had been eating until the report arrived, at which point he'd set his fork down with the controlled care of someone managing a strong feeling through deliberate physical action. Admiral Ryukuju, Aramaki, was not a loud man. He didn't need to be. Loud men fill the space their presence doesn't. Aramaki filled space the way a forest does, silently, completely, from every direction at once. He was tall and lean in the way that bamboo was lean, not skinny, but economical, every part of him doing exactly the work required and nothing extra. He read the report a second time. Then he set it on the table. "Straw hat," he said. "Yes, sir." The adjutant across from him was young and trying not to show that he'd been nervous walking in. "Vice Admiral Tashiro filed it this morning. The fleet made contact at grid. I can read the grid reference." Aramaki tapped one finger on the report. The light from his hands. Tashiro's exact description was, he read aloud, a pale gold emanation from the subject's extremities, consistent with hockey but not identical in quality. Impact force significantly exceeding previously documented parameters for the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Aramaki looked up. "He's eaten something new." "That's our assessment, sir." "At that island. We believe the island's long-term occupant was in possession of an unregistered devil fruit. Possibly of a type that, I know what type." Aramaki stood. He was very tall when he stood. The kind of tall that reorganizes a room. "I've been watching that island for 2 years. I thought we had more time." He walked to the wall, blank, stone, offering nothing, and stood in front of it with his hands behind his back. The question of Monkey D. Luffy becoming what he currently is was, until very recently, a question we could manage reactively. Events happened, we responded. He paused. "That window has closed." "What are your orders, sir?" Aramaki turned around. His face was the face of a man who has run every calculation and is comfortable with the result, and is not comfortable with what the result requires him to do, but is going to do it because comfort was never the point. "I'll handle it personally," he said. The adjutant kept his face very still. "Sir, the Straw Hat's current bounty and combat classification indicate a. I know his classification." Aramaki picked up his fork. Looked at it. Set it down again. The food had gone cold. He didn't particularly care. The classification was written before today's report. It'll need to be updated. He picked up his hat from the back of his chair. Find out where they're headed. Use the log pose analysis from Tashiro's navigation officer. I want to know the next island before they reach it. And the 5 elders, sir? They'll want to know about this development. I'll brief them. Something crossed Aramaki's face, not displeasure, exactly, but a kind of resolute weight, the look of a man who has made peace with being the one who does necessary things. After he left the room, the adjutant looked at the report on the table. Then he looked at the door through which his admiral had exited. He was a career Marine, intelligent and trained, and he had a feeling in his chest, not fear, exactly, but the precursor to it, the moment before the storm arrives when the air changes and the birds go quiet. He picked up the report, filed it, and went to send the navigation analysis request. Robin found Luffy on the upper deck an hour before sunset. She'd brought 2 cups of coffee, one for herself and somewhat hopefully, one for him, despite the fact that Luffy and coffee had a complicated relationship that mostly involved him making faces and drinking it anyway because someone was having it, and he didn't like feeling left out of things. He accepted the cup. Made a face. Drank it. They sat side by side on the upper deck railing, looking at the ocean going gold in the evening light. The Sunny made her sounds, the particular creak of good timber, the voice of wind in the rigging, the distant argument from below decks that was definitely Sanji and Zoro but wasn't escalating into actual violence, which meant it was just a maintenance argument, the one they had because it was comfortable. "You've been quiet today," Robin said. "For you." "I was thinking," Luffy said. "About the fruit?" "About Cayenne." He wrapped both hands around the cup. "He had all that power, right? More than most people ever get. And he still lost. Lost something so bad he ended up on that island and didn't leave." Robin was quiet. She was good at being quiet in a way that was warm rather than absent. "He wasn't afraid of losing," Luffy continued. "That wasn't it. He just couldn't forgive himself for not being strong enough when it mattered." He looked at his hands. The cup. The ordinary ceramic ordinariness of a coffee cup. I've thought about that before. What it would be like to be strong enough to protect everyone and still not manage it. He paused. Ace. He said it without flinching. He'd learned to say it that way, not because the grief was gone but because he'd decided the grief was his and he wasn't going to let it silence the name. The name deserved to be said. The person deserved to be said. Yes, Robin said softly. I don't want to be like Cayenne. After. Luffy looked up at the sky, which was doing something extraordinary with the light. I want to be strong enough that there's no after to be sad about. Strong enough that the people around me are. He searched for it. Safe. Like actually safe. Not I tried my best safe. Actually. Robin looked at him sideways. There were things she thought sometimes, about Luffy, that she kept to herself because they were too large to say aloud without sounding like she was delivering a speech, and Robin generally preferred precision over volume. One of those things was that he was the most human person she'd ever met, in the truest sense of the word, not flawed, not limited, but genuinely, completely present in every moment, feeling everything he felt at full volume and making no apology for any of it. The power you have now, she said, will it be enough? Luffy looked at his hand. Opened and closed it slowly. The gold was there. Faint, resting, like a coal that hadn't decided whether to glow or not. It's not enough yet, he said. But it's going to be. He said that the way he said the Pirate King thing, not a wish, not a hope. A statement about a future that he'd already decided was going to happen and was simply waiting for the present to catch up with. Robin smiled into her coffee cup where he couldn't see it. The island ahead, she said, changing her tone slightly, the shift into her scholar's register, slightly more precise, slightly cooler. I've been looking at the charts Nami pulled from the log pose data. It's called Oros. It's in the New World, mid-tier in terms of strategic importance. Good harbor. Large population. She paused. It also has a significant marine garrison. Luffy shrugged. Okay. Luffy. A significant garrison. We can handle it. We're not supposed to be handling garrisons, she said, with the particular patience of someone who has had this conversation or a version of it many times. We're supposed to be finding the One Piece. Yeah, but people need yes, Robin said. I know. People need help. She looked at him. Just be strategic about it. Luffy thought about this. I'll try, he said, which was as much strategy as she was going to get and she knew it. She finished her coffee. Get some sleep tonight. Properly. Not sitting on the figurehead. I sleep fine on the figurehead. You fall off the figurehead at least once a night. And I get back up. That's basically sleep. Robin stood, collected both cups with an extra hand that bloomed briefly from the railing, Hana no Mi, casual as breathing, and went below. Luffy sat on the railing as the sky went from gold to orange to the deep bruised purple of the last light, and he felt the engine in his chest run its quiet revolution, and he thought about Ace, and about Cayenne, and about the island ahead, and about how much bigger the world felt than it used to. He didn't feel afraid of any of it. He felt hungry, mostly. He went to bother Sanji for a late snack. Sanji was not having a good evening. This wasn't Luffy's fault for once. It was the thinking. Sanji cooked when he thought. His hands needed something to do when his brain was running hot, and his brain had been running hot since the fight on the Nameless Island. He'd seen the gold light in Luffy's hands. He'd seen the impact that pushed Zoro's feet across the deck. He'd done the math with the part of him that was always doing math under everything else, the part that calculated distances and timing and what each crew member could and couldn't do, because knowing that was survival and Sanji was exceptionally good at surviving. He was reorganizing the pantry, which didn't need reorganizing but gave his hands something to do while he thought, when Luffy appeared in the kitchen doorway wearing his hat backward, which meant he'd been trying to use it as a pillow again. Sanji, Luffy said. Is there anything left from dinner? Leftovers are in the second shelf. Sanji didn't look up. Don't eat the stock. That's for tomorrow. Luffy went straight for the stock. Sanji's leg was already in motion before the thought fully formed, a single kick, connecting gently with the back of Luffy's hand, redirecting it from the stock to the actual leftover container. Not hard. Just precise. The way you'd correct a dog, if the dog were somehow made of rubber and immune to most forms of consequence. I said second shelf. Sanji said. Luffy sat down on the kitchen floor with the leftover container, and began eating directly from it with his hands, which Sanji had given up protesting about sometime around Whole Cake Island. They were quiet for a minute. Just the sound of Luffy eating, which was not a small sound, and the scrape of Sanji reorganizing things that were already organized. Hey, Sanji, Luffy said. What? Are you worried? Sanji stopped reorganizing. Turned around. Looked at Luffy, cross-legged on the kitchen floor, food container in his lap, hat still backward, looking up at him with those eyes that saw things other people's eyes slid off. About what? Sanji said. About me. Luffy gestured vaguely at himself. The new thing. Sanji picked up a cigarette. Lit it. Leaned against the counter. I'm not worried about you, he said. He said it plainly, not as reassurance. As fact. I'm thinking about what comes next. What the Marines are going to do when they finish writing their report. He exhaled smoke. They're going to send someone serious. Good, Luffy said and meant it. Sanji looked at him. You're unbelievable, he said, but his voice had something fond in it under the exasperation. I'm hungry, Luffy said. Is there more? There was more. There was always more, when it was Sanji's kitchen. The island of Oros appeared on the horizon the following morning, a long, low silhouette broken by the rise of buildings in the harbor district, the kind of island that had been lived on long enough to look settled, the architecture layering over itself in the way of places that had been built and rebuilt across generations. The harbor was busy even from a distance, ships, trade, the ordinary productive noise of a port doing port things. What wasn't ordinary was the marine blockade. Not a fleet. Not a fleet here to engage. This was a garrison deployment, 3 warships anchored in a loose triangle off the harbor mouth, not attacking anything, just present. The specific kind of present that meant they didn't need to attack. Everyone knew they were there. Everyone already knew what that meant. Nami had the spyglass and her expression said everything her mouth was taking a moment to organize. They've got the harbor locked down, she said. The trade ships are queuing outside the blockade. They're being boarded and inspected. She lowered the glass. That's a search pattern. They're looking for something. Or someone, Robin said. There's a flag on the lead ship. Nami raised the glass again. That's an admiral's pennant. The deck went very quiet. Usopp made a sound like a small animal that had just realized what season it was. We should absolutely go around, he said in the voice of someone who was completely serious, and wanted that on the record. We should go around, we should go to a different island, we should pick an island that doesn't have an admiral's pennant on a blockade ship. People can't get in or out of the harbor, Luffy said. He was at the bow, looking at the blockade. His voice was very calm. There are families in there. And the ships queuing are trader ships, not pirate ships. They're just people trying to go somewhere. Luffy, Nami started. I'm not going around, he said. The Admiral, I know. He turned around. He was smiling, but it wasn't the carefree smile. It was the one that sat below that, steadier, older somehow, the smile that showed up in the moments before things got serious. That's actually kind of great, right? We'll see what we're dealing with. We'll see what we're dealing with, Usopp repeated slowly, as if testing whether the sentence made more sense repeated. It didn't. We'll see what we're dealing with, he says, like an admiral is a test, like an admiral is, anchor up, Luffy said to Frankie. Take us in. Super, Frankie said, and meant it, and the Thousand Sunny turned toward Oros like she was looking forward to it. The Marine lookout on the lead blockade ship spotted the Thousand Sunny 18 minutes before she reached the checkpoint perimeter. The alarm went up immediately, A distinctive pirate vessel with a distinctive captain with a very distinctive bounty was easy to identify, even at a distance, when you'd been briefed that it might show up. The briefing had come from Aramaki directly, relayed down the chain in the clipped, precise language he preferred. The instruction was equally precise: do not engage independently. Hold position. Signal immediately upon contact. I will be there. The garrison commander, a rear admiral named Gesso, career military, solid if unspectacular, did exactly as instructed. He ordered his ships to close the formation slightly, maintaining the blockade without moving to engage. He sent the signal. Then he stood on his deck and watched the Sunny come in and tried to measure the distance between now and whatever was going to happen next. The Sunny stopped just outside the blockade's outer perimeter. Not because she was asked to. Because Luffy was looking at the formation and figuring out the geometry. 3 ships, he said to himself. That's the center one, then. He looked up. The one with the flag. That's who gave the orders. Luffy, Nami said. We don't know if the Admiral is actually. A figure stepped off the deck of the lead marine ship. Didn't jump. Didn't use a boat. Just stepped off the railing into the air and walked it, the way certain people walk when gravity has learned to have a negotiated relationship with their preferences. He crossed the distance between the ship and the Sunny's outer perimeter in a way that looked casual and covered about 200 meters, and he was still walking when he stopped in midair approximately 40 feet from the Sunny's bow. Aramaki. In person, he was even taller than in reports. The green coat hung from his shoulders like it was part of the air around him. He had a sword at his hip that he hadn't drawn, and showed no immediate intention of drawing. His posture communicated absolute absence of urgency, the posture of a man who is exactly where he expected to be and is in no hurry about what happens next. He looked at the Sunny. He looked at Luffy. Monkey D, Luffy, he said. His voice carried across the water with the ease of someone who has spent a career projecting authority into large spaces. I'm going to ask you to turn your ship around. Leave this island's waters. This doesn't need to be a conflict. Luffy looked at him. You've got a blockade up. People can't get in or out. Temporary security measure. What are you looking for? Aramaki was quiet for a beat. That's not a conversation I'm required to have with you. You're keeping families from their harbor. Luffy's voice was still even. Workers and traders and people who just need to go home. I'm going to open the harbor. Something shifted very slightly in Aramaki's expression. Not anger. More like a recalibration. A man updating a model. You're newly powerful, Aramaki said. I can feel it from here. Something changed. He tilted his head. That changes the conversation. It doesn't change the outcome. What's the outcome? Luffy asked. You leave, Aramaki said simply. Or I make you leave. Luffy looked at him for a moment. I like the second one better, he said. Aramaki moved. He was fast. Genuinely, completely, world-class Admiral fast. The kind of speed that had ended the careers of pirates who had survived everything else the New World threw at them. Vines erupted from him, the Mori Mori no Mi's power unfolding in an instant, massive, ancient, wood-hard and steel-dense, reaching for the Sunny's hull with the absolute grip of something that didn't know how to let go. Luffy stretched backward over the figurehead, rubber making the geometry work, and slammed both palms onto the incoming vines. The gold light went through his hands into the impact. The vines stopped. Not deflected. Stopped. The growth halted mid-lunge, trembling with the force of what had hit them. Aramaki stood in the air and looked at his own plants and then at Luffy, and his expression went through 3 things in rapid succession, arriving at something that was the Admiral's version of attention. Luffy grinned. Yeah, he said. It changed. He launched off the figurehead. What followed was not a complete battle. Luffy would have called it a warm-up. Aramaki, to his credit and his frustration, would have agreed. The Admiral's vines were extraordinary. They grew, hardened, reached, regenerated with the casual permanence of something that didn't need to be gentle because time was always on its side. Aramaki used them with a tactical intelligence that matched his rank, not brute force, but geometry, cutting off angles, controlling space, making the fight happen where he wanted it to happen. The problem was that Luffy kept happening somewhere else. He was faster than Aramaki had expected. Faster than the report had indicated. Faster than the report could have indicated, because the report was 3 days old and Luffy had spent 3 days having his body rewrite what it considered possible. He moved through the vines with rubber flexibility that made the geometry Aramaki was constructing irrelevant, going around, through, under, arriving at angles that shouldn't have been available and hitting from them with that gold-lit force that made the Admiral's defenses shudder in ways they normally didn't shudder. Aramaki caught him on the fourth exchange. A vine wrapped around Luffy's waist, then his torso, tightening with the wood's merciless patient strength. Luffy stretched. Harder. The vine stretched with him, and then the gold light pulsed and the vine cracked, actually cracked, the wood splitting like it had forgotten it was supposed to be unbreakable. Luffy came out of the split vine already throwing a punch, and Aramaki had to drop 20 feet in the air to avoid taking it clean, and the displaced force of the punch hit the surface of the ocean below, and sent a wave outward that rocked all 3 marine ships simultaneously. Aramaki, 20 feet lower, looked up at Luffy. Luffy looked down at him. The harbor was quiet. The trading ships in the queue outside the blockade had stopped their engines. People were standing on decks and looking. People in the harbor itself, at windows, at docks, at anywhere that had a line of sight, were watching. Aramaki made a decision. Not the decision to retreat. Not quite. The decision to pause, to withdraw from this immediate engagement and recalculate, because a recalibration was required and Aramaki was not the kind of man who let pride prevent him from doing what was strategically correct. The vines pulled back. Smoothly, without drama. "This conversation isn't finished," Aramaki said. "I know," Luffy said. He was still glowing faintly. Still completely relaxed. "You can come find me whenever you want." Aramaki looked at him for a long moment with those flat, assessing eyes. Then he turned and walked back across the air to his ship. The blockade formation held for exactly 1 more hour. Then, ship by ship, it withdrew. They docked in Oroza's harbor to a noise that took Luffy a moment to identify because it was directed at him specifically. The sound of a lot of people being glad. Not cheering, exactly. More like the collective exhale of relief that becomes, once the relief is fully realized, something louder and warmer. People came down to the docks. Dock workers, traders, a group of children who had apparently spent the blockade duration watching from the harbor master's window and had opinions about it. Nami managed the situation with the efficiency of someone who knew a good moment for positive public relations when she saw one, and also knew exactly where the best market stalls were, and had already located 3 that would accept the Sunny's currency at a favorable exchange rate. Usopp was mid-story within about 6 minutes. The story involved him personally doing most of the heavy lifting in the confrontation with the Admiral, which was historically inaccurate but narratively compelling, and the crowd of children was extremely on board with it. Zoro had found a set of stairs leading up from the harbor, and was sitting at the top of them, 1 knee up, looking out over the water where the marine ships had gone. His 3 swords were at his side. He was thinking, visibly, in the way that Zoro thought, outwardly still, internally doing something that involved every part of him. Luffy dropped onto the step next to him. "We didn't finish that," Luffy said. "About Aramaki." "No," Zoro said. "He'll come back. Definitely." Luffy looked at the water. The afternoon was cooling, the light going long and amber, boats moving in and out of the harbor now that the blockade was gone. "When he does," Zoro said, "don't go alone." Luffy looked at him. Zoro was still looking at the water. He wasn't going to say it again or elaborate on it or explain what he meant. He didn't need to. Luffy leaned back on his hands and looked at the sky. "Okay," he said. The word meant everything it was supposed to mean, and they both knew it, and nothing else needed to be said about it. The engine in Luffy's chest was warm. He could feel it now even when he wasn't doing anything, a steady, low heat, like a star in its resting state, burning with infinite patience in the dark, waiting for the moment when it needed to do something other than wait. He was still becoming. He could feel that too. The edges of what he was, where they were, how far they'd already moved from where they'd been 3 days ago, how much further they were going to go. Somewhere on the sea, Aramaki was recalibrating. Somewhere above the sea, in rooms without windows, people were being told what had happened and adjusting their expectations and their timelines. Luffy ate the last piece of food he'd stuffed in his pocket during the harbor greeting, someone's fish skewer, still warm, very good, and looked at the sky going purple at its edges, and felt the stars coming out above it, and felt something in himself that rhymed with their size and patience and absolute lack of apology for the amount of light they'd put out. He stretched his arms out wide, as far as they went, which was very far. "We need more food before we leave," he announced. Zoro put his face in his hand. Luffy was already running back down toward the market. Chapter 3: Hunger and Fire. Oros had a festival the night they stayed. Nobody planned it. These things didn't get planned, they happened the way good things often did, which was organically, starting with one person opening a bottle of something celebratory and the next person joining and the next until the harbor district was loud with music and lit with lanterns and the specific joy of people who'd been holding their breath for a week and had just been told they could stop. The Straw Hats were in the middle of it within the hour. Usopp had found a drummer he liked and was currently attempting to learn the drum pattern through a combination of watching, asking, and just starting to hit things and seeing what happened. Chopper was being carried on someone's shoulders and looking thrilled about it. Frankie had made friends with every carpenter and shipwright in the district on the basis that he was a cyborg made of ships, and they found this professionally interesting. Sanji had found a restaurant kitchen and was in it, cooking, because when Sanji was given access to local ingredients his instinct was always to immediately make them into something. Zoro had found a set of large barrels to sit on, and was asleep on them within about 12 minutes. Nami was at a table in the best position she'd found within 3 minutes of docking, corner, elevated, full view of both exits, with a cup of something strong and her log pose and Luffy's wanted poster spread out in front of her. The poster had Luffy's grinning face on it, and a number that had gone up again after Wano and would, she calculated, go up again after today. She traced the number with one finger and thought about what Aramaki's face had looked like when Luffy cracked the vine. She put the poster away and drank her drink and decided to worry about it tomorrow. Luffy was at the center of the festival and also slightly above it, sitting on someone's rooftop with a plate of food the size of a table and looking down at the street below with the open-faced enjoyment of someone watching a very good thing happen. The lantern light made everything warm. The music was good. Not technically good but actually good, the kind of playing that came from people knowing the song in their bodies rather than just their hands. A kid climbed up onto the roof next to him. 8, maybe 9, wearing the practical clothes of a harbor kid, hair wild from a long day of watching everything. The kid sat down next to Luffy without asking permission, looked at the food, looked at Luffy. Luffy offered the plate. The kid took a piece of fish with complete comfort, ate it, looked at the street below. "You're the pirate," the kid said. "Yep." "You fought the marine guy." "Yep." "Were you scared?" Luffy thought about this with more seriousness than the kid probably expected. He'd learned to actually think about that question rather than just reflexively saying no, because the reflexive no had been true for so long it had stopped being interesting, and he'd found that the more interesting answer was more honest anyway. "Not scared," he said. But I could feel that he was serious. So I took it seriously. He ate something. There's a difference between not being scared and not paying attention. Scared makes you freeze. Paying attention makes you faster. The kid chewed on this along with the fish. "He'll come back," the kid said. "He will." "What'll you do?" "Beat him," Luffy said. Plainly. Not boastfully, it was a plan, stated as a plan. The way you'd say "I'll take the eastern road" when someone asked your route. The kid looked at him sideways. "You sure?" Luffy grinned. "I wasn't sure about a lot of things I did. I'm sure about this one." The kid seemed satisfied with this. They sat together on the rooftop and ate and watched the festival and the harbor lights until Luffy heard Nami calling his name in the specific tone that meant get down here and go to sleep before something expensive happens, and he hopped off the roof and the kid watched him go, and then looked out at the dark water of the harbor and the space beyond it where the blockade ships had been, and felt, for reasons the kid couldn't have named, completely fine about all of it. They left Oros at dawn, before the city had fully woken, the sunny slipping out of the harbor in the blue-gray light with the quiet efficiency of a crew that had learned to move fast when fast was needed. Nami had the next heading from the log pose. 2 days of sailing, give or take, toward an island the log pose called significant by the intensity of its pull. Luffy slept until noon. He woke up in the crow's nest, which was not where he'd gone to sleep, and had a conversation with himself about how that kept happening, and then climbed down to find food. What he found instead was Zoro. Zoro was on the main deck, and he was training with an intensity that made the air around him feel different. Not his normal training. Luffy had watched Zoro train for years, knew the rhythms of it, the sets and repetitions, the meditative quality of a man who had turned suffering into a language he was fluent in. This was different. This was Zoro training like he was angry. He wasn't angry. He was responding. Luffy understood the distinction immediately because he knew Zoro the way you know someone you've fought beside in the dark, when all the performance and posturing falls away and what's left is just who someone actually is. Zoro had moved his feet on the deck during their spar. An inch. And he was going to make sure it didn't happen again. He was doing weighted sword swings, both hands on Wado, Shusway sheathed but weighted, cycling through angles with the mechanical precision of someone pushing a specific muscle past its threshold. His forearms were corded tight. His breathing was controlled but audible. A thin line of blood ran down his left wrist from somewhere. He'd pushed a grip angle too far, torn something small. He hadn't stopped. Luffy sat down on the steps to the upper deck and watched him. He didn't interrupt. He didn't cheer or make noise. He just watched the way you watch something that matters, with your full attention and without the need to do anything with it except witness it. After 10 minutes, Zoro stopped. Not because he was done, he wasn't done. Because Luffy was there, and he'd known Luffy was there, and he turned around and looked at him directly. I need you to hit me, Zoro said. Okay, Luffy said. Full power. Luffy stood up. With the new thing. Full. Don't calibrate. Zoro set 2 of his swords aside. Kept Wado. I need to know what I'm training against. Luffy looked at him for a moment. His eyes moved to the cut on Zoro's wrist. You're already bleeding, he said. I know. Chopper's going to yell at me. I know that too. Zoro raised Wado. His stance settled, low, wide, real. Come on. Luffy cracked his neck. Stretched both arms. The gold light came at his invitation now, smooth and immediate, pooling in his hands with a warmth that had gotten deeper and steadier since the fight with Aramaki. Every exchange with the Admiral, brief as it was, had turned the engine another notch. He came at Zoro at real speed, not his absolute ceiling, but above where they'd been in the spar. A direct right, gold-lit clean. Zoro took it. Not deflected. Not redirected. He braced Wado across both forearms in a guard he'd built specifically for this moment, adjusted the angle during the approach, and he took it. The impact shook the entire deck. The Sunny rocked. Not dramatically, she was too well built for drama, but she rocked, a definite lean, and several things in the kitchen shifted, and Sanji appeared at the galley door with a cigarette and an expression that said he'd registered what was happening and had made a decision not to interfere. Zoro had held. His feet hadn't moved. He looked at Luffy over his crossed forearms. Something in his eyes was ferocious in a way that had nothing to do with anger. It was the ferocity of a man who has found the next wall, and is already calculating how to tear it down. Again, he said. Luffy hit him again. Zoro held. Again. Held. On the fourth one, Zoro didn't just hold, he pushed back. In the instant of the impact, He added his own force through the guard, driving back against the blow, and Luffy felt it. The resistance going live instead of passive, Zoro's own power meeting his rather than simply stopping it. Luffy laughed. He couldn't help it. The joy of it was enormous, the feeling of being genuinely met, of pushing and having something pushed back with real intent. There it is, Luffy said. Yeah, Zoro said, breathing harder now, blood from the wrist dripping onto the deck, not caring. There it is. Chopper came on deck at exactly this moment, saw Zoro's wrist, saw the expression on both of their faces, and made a sound like a small boiling kettle. What have you done to your wrist? What is that? I asked. That blood, Zoro, that's blood. Training accident, Zoro said. Training accident from what? From being an absolute, Chopper, Luffy said. Chopper looked at him. Luffy's eyes were warm and serious simultaneously, which was an expression Chopper had learned to pay attention to. He needed to know something, Luffy said. He knows it now. Chopper sputtered. Then deflated. Then went to find his bandages. Zoro sat down on the deck and let Chopper work on his wrist and stared at the middle distance with the expression of a man running calculations inside a very large head, arriving at results he found satisfying. They were still a day out from the log pose's target island when the sky changed. It happened in the afternoon. Nami felt it first. She always felt weather changes first. Her skin registered atmospheric shifts before most instruments could, a gift she'd developed over years of navigating seas that changed their minds faster than anyone could track. She came on deck from below with her climatac already in hand and looked at the sky to the south with narrow eyes. That's not natural, she said. The sky to the south was doing something unusual. The cloud formation was wrong, the shape of it, the speed of movement, the way it sat on the horizon like it was being held in place rather than drifting. Dark in a way that wasn't storm dark but something heavier and more deliberate. Robin appeared at her side. She had a book open and she closed it without looking at it. That's coming from the island, Robin said. What would cause that? Robin looked at the cloud formation for a moment. Her expression did something subtle. Something burning, she said. Something large and burning, generating enough heat and debris to do that to the atmosphere above it. She paused. Or someone. Nami looked at her. Robin's eyes met hers. Aramakis mori mori no mi, Robin said carefully. If you consider the scale of what he can grow, and the scale of what burning that much organic mass would, full speed, Nami said, and was already moving toward the helm. Frankie! Luffy's voice came from the figurehead where he'd apparently been watching the sky too, ahead of all of them, reading the wrong thing in the clouds with that instinct of his that was either perceptive or lucky, and had never needed to be distinguished between. Full speed! Super! Frankie was already on it. The Sunny rode hard for the next 40 minutes. The cloud formation grew larger and more defined as they approached, and the smell reached them after 30 minutes, with smoke, but enormous, the smell of something old and massive burning, the smell of a forest becoming something other than a forest. The island came up over the horizon. It was called Kova. The log pose had flagged it for its magnetic field, which was strong and unusual. The island itself was mid-sized, mountainous in the interior, wooded down to the coast. It had a town, because the lower half of the town was currently wrapped in vegetation so dense and so rapidly grown that you could see it from the sea, vines like ship cables, tree roots buckled through stone streets, growth happening at a speed that had nothing natural in it. People were on the beaches. A lot of people. The town's population, or most of it, pushed to the waterline by the growth that had consumed the streets, standing in the water in some cases, holding children, holding elderly, holding the bare minimum of what you grab when you leave your home because someone gives you 30 seconds. Marines on the cliffs, Usopp said from his perch, glass up. 2 ships East Cove. They're not engaging. They're just watching. Watching? Nami said. Watching, Usopp confirmed. His voice had gone strange. The Admiral's there. On the cliff. He's... A pause. He's growing the town. Slowly. He's growing the town to flush people out. The deck went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of shared understanding. The sharp, edged quiet of people registering something that requires an immediate response. Why? Nami said. The island has someone he's looking for, Robin said. She was looking at the cliff, at the distant figure standing at its edge, still and green-coated and surrounded by the faint rustling movement of growth that emanated from him like a field. He's using the population as leverage. Luffy was at the bow. He wasn't loud. He wasn't doing the thing where he announced what he was going to do, and then did it. He was just standing at the bow, looking at the people on the beach, looking at the town wrapped in vines, looking at the cliff where Aramaki stood. His hands were at his sides. The gold light was there. Not pulsing or crackling, just steady. Continuous. Like it had decided this was a good moment to stay. Nami, he said. Yeah. Get the people from the beach onto ships. Anyone who needs water or food, Sanji, already thinking about it. Sanji said from behind him. Zoro. I'll take the marine ships in the cove, Zoro said. Keep them from flanking. Robin, Frankie, will handle the growth in the town, Robin said. Clear the streets. Usopp, cover fire, cliff access, already planning my angle, chopper, medical, I know, I'm already counting supplies. Luffy turned around. His crew was already moving. Already distributed, already purposeful, already the machine they built themselves into over years of exactly this. Arriving at the place where things needed to be done, and doing them without waiting to be told twice. He looked at them and the feeling in his chest wasn't the engine. It was something else, something the engine sat inside of, a larger warmth that had been there since before any fruit, and would be there long after. Thanks, he said. Nami threw a rolled-up chart at him. Go deal with your admiral. He went. He cleared the water between the Sunny and the island with a single Gomu Gomu rocket, both arms back, stretched to the Sunny's stern rail, and launched himself up and over the sea in a long arc that peaked high above the island and came down toward the cliff where Aramaki stood. The admiral heard him coming. You couldn't not. The approach was not subtle. He turned. Luffy hit the cliff edge feet first and the stone cracked from the impact, spreading fractures like a dropped plate, and came up out of the crouch with a punch already in motion. Aramaki took it on a vine shield that erupted from the cliff face, 3 meters of compressed hardwood that he'd grown in the 2 seconds between Luffy's landing and the punch arriving. The shield cracked. Split. The gold-lit force pushed through the crack and the shockwave snapped Aramaki's coat and threw his hair back and moved him a step. 1 step. On bedrock. That was Aramaki's version of significant. He looked at Luffy through the broken shield. You came faster than I expected, he said. Your plan was terrible, Luffy said. People live in that town. I know. No apology in it. No particular pleasure either. Just the flat acknowledgement of fact from a man who had made a decision and was comfortable with it. There's someone in that town who poses a greater danger to those same people than anything I've done to the architecture. What? Aramaki let the shield fall, the broken wood crumbling from the cliff face in chunks, and straightened his coat with one hand in a gesture that was entirely automatic, the gesture of a man so long in uniform that the uniform's dignity is as reflexive as breathing. Someone came to Kova 3 months ago, he said. A civilian who isn't a civilian. Who is in possession of information and materials that the world government has a compelling interest in securing. He looked at Luffy steadily. This isn't punitive. It's a retrieval. By burying the whole town. By ensuring no one leaves the island until we find who we're looking for. And the people? Collateral inconvenience. Luffy looked at him. Aramaki met his gaze without discomfort. He wasn't being cruel. He was being, in his own framework, precise. The population of Kova was an inconvenience in the mathematical sense, a complicating variable in an equation he was trying to resolve. He didn't hate them or disregard them. He'd simply calculated that the thing he was looking for outweighed them. That's wrong, Luffy said. Not angrily. As a statement. The world is complex. Aramaki said. Simple moral positions don't survive contact with complex problems. Mine do, Luffy said. Aramaki almost smiled. I've noticed. The vines came from every direction simultaneously, from the cliff face, from the tree line behind Luffy, from cracks in the stone underfoot that Aramaki had been seeding since Luffy landed without him noticing. They were fast. Faster than on the water, where he'd had less surface to work from. Here, on land, on an island covered in his medium, Aramaki was at his full capacity, and full capacity was something extraordinary. Luffy went up. He launched himself straight vertical, both arms snapping down to the cliff to propel himself 20 meters into the air above the vine assault, and then he looked down at the pattern of growth below him and understood it, saw the shape of what Aramaki was doing, the geometry, the root systems and the growth angles, and he understood it the way you understand a language when you've heard enough of it. He came down through the gaps between the vines, rubber thin and precise, hitting the cliff face between two massive root clusters and bouncing off it at an angle Aramaki hadn't anticipated, coming in from the Admiral's left with a two-handed blow that carried the gold light in a focused concentrated form, not spread, not diffuse, but gathered, the way light gathers in a lens. It hit Aramaki in the shoulder. The Admiral went sideways. Not far, 3 meters, maybe 4, sliding across the cliff top with his feet working to arrest the slide. Not a small thing, given who he was. He planted and turned and his expression had shifted from the flat assessor's look to something more present, more engaged. The ground around them erupted. Luffy had expected something like the vines, reaching, grappling, trying to wrap. What Aramaki actually did was grow a forest. Not metaphorically. From the cliff top outward, trees erupted at impossible speed, full-growth trees, dense canopied, root interlocked, turning the open cliff top into a contained environment in about 12 seconds. Walls of wood. A ceiling of interlocked branches above. Roots lacing the ground so thoroughly that movement across it was a navigation problem. Aramaki was giving himself his best fighting environment, taking Luffy's mobility away. Luffy stood in the suddenly dense forest and looked around at it. Then he exhaled. The exhale was different from a normal exhale. It came from somewhere deeper than lungs, from the center of the chest where the engine was, the thing Kaien had given him, and in that exhale everything from the fight so far fed back into it. Every punch, every dodge, every absorbed impact. The engine cycled through all of it and converted it, the Saiyan mechanism doing exactly what it was designed to do. The gold light came out of him. Not from his hands this time. From his skin. From the surface of him, all at once, like a sunrise happening inside a human body, warm and expanding and absolutely without apology for how much of the space it took up. The trees nearest to him, Aramaki's trees, grown from Aramaki's power, caught the edge of it, and their bark turned white, the wood complaining under the new kind of force it was adjacent to. Luffy felt himself. He felt where he'd been and where he was now and the distance between those 2 points, and the distance was significant, and it was growing. The engine was running hot. It had been warming up since the nameless island, ramping through the spar with Zoro, through the first exchange with Aramaki, through the last 10 minutes of this fight, and it was at a pitch now that he hadn't been at before. His hair moved. Upward. Slowly. The black of it lifting at the ends, the roots rising, a static quality in the air around him that had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with what was accumulating inside him and pressing outward through the only outlets it had. Aramaki stepped through his own trees. He stopped. He looked at Luffy. Luffy looked at him. The gold was in his eyes now, not replacing the dark irises, but behind them, lit from within, a depth of illumination that made the brown of his eyes look like amber held to a light. "What are you?" Aramaki said. He asked it clinically, as a data-gathering question. But there was something underneath it that was closer to wonder than a man like Aramaki would have been comfortable naming. "Still me," Luffy said. His voice was layered, his own voice and something else behind it, deeper, the resonant lower register of something much larger than a person speaking through a person-shaped vessel. "Just more of me." He moved. At this level, He wasn't hitting individually. He was hitting in combinations, not in the way of a practiced fighter cycling through techniques, but in the way of a storm hitting a coastline, multiple points of contact in rapid succession, each one carrying that focused golden force. Aramaki met each one. He was extraordinary. He was still extraordinary. A lesser Marine Admiral would have been finished 4 minutes ago, but meeting them at this output cost something, and what it cost was ground. Literal ground. Aramaki moved back. And back. And back. The trees he'd grown became obstacles for himself as the fight reversed, Luffy moving forward through them with the rubber flexibility that turned their density from an advantage into an irrelevance, Aramaki backing through them and losing the controlled geometry of his own environment. They broke through the tree line to the cliff edge. The ocean was below. Both of them. The sky above, open again, the smoke from the town rising in columns. Aramaki made a cage. It came from below the cliff, root systems driving up through the rock, vertical shafts of growth rising in a cylinder around Luffy, closing at the top to form a dome. It was a different tactic, not to contain, because this man had already demonstrated he'd break through, but to slow. To buy seconds. To reset. Luffy looked at the cage for exactly 1 heartbeat. Then he put both hands on the floor, stretched his arms down through the root gaps to the cliff face below, and pulling himself downward with catastrophic force, the cage roots screaming against the stress, and he came through the bottom of it like a bullet through paper, dropping below the cliff face, swinging out over the open water on his own stretched arms, and then launching back up and over the cliff edge from below, arriving behind Aramaki. The Admiral turned. Too slow. The punch landed center mass. Not the shoulder, not a glancing hit. The full gold burning, Saiyan engine fed, rubber launch thing, dead center, all of it, nothing held back. The sound it made was wrong for a punch. Too large. It moved through the air the way a close lightning strike moves, the noise arriving in your chest before it reaches your ears. Aramaki went backward across the cliff. His coat shredded at the chest. His feet carved twin lines in the stone as they tried to find purchase and failed. He hit a tree, his own tree, thick as a ship's mast, and the tree snapped. He stood in the wreckage of the tree. He was standing. That was the remarkable thing. A different person, a different admiral, even, would not have been standing. He was breathing hard, one hand against the shattered trunk, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth, and he was standing. Luffy was standing too, 40 feet away, the gold light running over him in slow waves, his hair hanging between its normal position and something vertical as the excess energy redistributed. He was breathing like he'd been running hard. Not from exhaustion, from the sheer intake required, the body processing what it was becoming, the continuous conversion happening inside his chest. They looked at each other. Aramaki pressed the back of his hand to his mouth. Looked at the blood. His expression was complicated. Not defeated. Not afraid. Something that looked, at its most honest, like a man revising his understanding of something he thought he'd understood. The bounty on your head, he said, his voice even, is going to be impossible to calculate after today. Good, Luffy said. This doesn't end here. I know. Luffy let the gold light pull back, not forcibly, just easing off the throttle, letting it settle back to the steady resting state it had moved to lately. But the town does. The vines. Aramaki looked at him. Then he turned and looked at the town below the cliff. The growth he'd driven through the streets was already dying, the roots losing vitality as his attention and power redirected. Wood dried and crumbled at a rapid pace whenever he stopped actively sustaining it. Within minutes the streets would be passable again. The vines, Aramaki said, will come down. He turned back. This time. And the person you were looking for? A pause. Aramaki's expression went neutral in the very specific way that meant he was making a decision. They're already gone, he said. I expect they left with your crew member's assistance. He glanced toward where Robin had been working on the streets below. The woman with the flower power. She's perceptive. She's the smartest person I know, Luffy said. Something shifted fractionally in Aramaki's expression, not warmth, but something that recognized the truth when it was stated simply. He turned and walked away from the cliff edge, back toward his ships in the cove, and his coat hung differently now from where it had shredded, and the trees he'd grown stood bare and dying around the cliff top as their sustaining energy withdrew. Luffy watched him go. The gold was in him still, humming. Not violent. Satisfied, almost, the feeling of a thing that has been used for its purpose and found the purpose worthy. He looked at his hands. The light in his skin had gone back under the surface, but the surface itself was different. He could feel the difference the way you feel a shift in temperature, not dramatically, not suddenly, but present and real. He was not what he'd been when he arrived at this cliff. He was not what he'd been when he arrived at Oro's. He was not what he'd been on the nameless island. Every fight turned the engine. Every fight left him somewhere ahead of where he'd started. He thought about what Aramaki had said. What are you? He thought about Kayan, on his island with no name, saying the engine had no ceiling. He thought about the gold light and where it was going, what forms it was still going to take, what it would look like when he was at the top of it. He didn't know. Not specifically. He just knew the direction. He always knew the direction. By evening the town was clearing. Aramaki's vegetation died fast without his power behind it, dried to gray wood, crumbled to dust in some places, left in others as a strange kind of ruin that the townspeople would be cutting up and burning for firewood for weeks. The streets were passable. The harbor was open. Robin sat on the harbor wall with the person she'd helped evacuate from Kova, a middle-aged woman with careful eyes and ink-stained fingers, who had been brought to this island 3 months ago by accident or fate, or whatever word you preferred for the thing that brought people to places that mattered at times that mattered. Luffy dropped off the cliff face, not jumped, fell, in that casual way he had of treating gravity as a mild suggestion, and came up to them. "She's okay?" he asked, looking at the woman. "She's fine," Robin said. She had what the Admiral was looking for. She glanced at the woman. The woman looked back, level and unafraid. "She's going to keep it." Luffy looked at the woman. The woman looked at Luffy. Something about her eyes, not fear, not awe, just the direct assessment of someone measuring what she was seeing. "Thank you," the woman said. "Yeah," Luffy said easily. "You need a ride somewhere?" The woman almost smiled. "I have my own arrangements." "Okay." He turned to Robin. "Is Zoro done with the ships?" "He didn't sink them," Robin said, which was Zoro's version of restraint, and they both knew it. "The crews withdrew to the island's other side." "And the people from the beach?" "Safe. Sanji fed approximately 200 people and is aggressively pleased about it." Luffy grinned. "Good." He walked back toward where the Sunny was docked, hands in his pockets, hat tilted back from the evening air, the gold sitting quiet in him, the engine resting between revolutions. Zoro fell in beside him after about 20 meters. He'd come from the eastern side of the harbor, 3 swords on his hip, a new cut across his forearm from the work with the marine ships in the cove. He didn't look at Luffy. He walked beside him and looked at the road ahead. "Aramaki?" Zoro said. "He left." He left," Luffy said. "He'll be back." Zoro absorbed this. "How was it?" "Good," Luffy said. Then, more carefully. "Different from before." He considered how to say the rest of it. "Every time I fight now I can feel it after. Where I was before the fight, and where I am after. The gap." Zoro was quiet. "The gap's getting bigger," Luffy said. Zoro's jaw set slightly. The particular setting of someone filing information away in the place they keep things that matter. "Then we need to spar more," Zoro said. "I said I'm getting stronger after every fight, and I said we need to spar more." He glanced sideways. "Unless you want to show up to wherever this is going with your captain being the only one who can do anything." Luffy thought about this. "No," he said. "No," Zoro agreed. They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. "Hey Zoro," Luffy said. "What?" You're going to be the world's greatest swordsman. Zoro was quiet. He knew Luffy said true things the way other people said hello, without preamble and without ceremony. He knew when Luffy said something like that it wasn't comfort or encouragement. It was witness. Someone who saw where you were going and simply stated it because they'd already seen it clearly enough to know. I know, Zoro said. They walked onto the Sunny's gangplank. Usopp was on deck, mid-story to a small audience of townspeople who'd come to the dock to see the ship, his arms wide, his voice enormous, describing the fight on the cliff in a way that bore a very loose relationship with what had actually happened but was genuinely thrilling as fiction. Chopper was sitting in the middle of the audience, listening raptly, apparently having forgotten that he was there and knows what actually happened. Sanji had food on the deck table, an enormous spread for the crew and incidentally available to anyone on the dock who wanted some, which everyone did. Nami was asleep in a deck chair with the log pose in one hand, which meant she'd been watching the route data until she'd lost the fight with her own exhaustion. Frankie had found 3 things in the town that needed engineering attention and was fixing all 3 simultaneously while humming. Brook had his violin out and was playing something slow and sweet for the people on the dock, and the music moved over the harbor in the evening air like it had always been there, like the harbor knew the song. Luffy stood at the top of the gangplank and looked at all of it. His crew. His people. The warmth of them, distinct, individual, enormous. The engine in his chest was quiet. But the other thing, the bigger thing, the thing it sat inside, that burned as steadily as it always had. As steadily as it always would. He sat down on the deck next to Nami's chair and stole food off the spread and ate, and the evening went dark around all of them, and the music played on. That night, while everyone slept, Luffy sat on the Sunny's figurehead and put his hands in front of him in the dark and let the gold light come. It was brighter than it had been on the nameless island. Fuller. It lit the water below in shifting patterns, gold on black. He thought about the ceiling Kyan had said didn't exist. He thought about what it would look like, the next form, the next layer, whatever the engine was building toward. He couldn't picture it specifically. He could feel its shape the way you can feel a room in the dark, not seeing, but knowing the size of it from the way sound moved and the quality of the air. It was enormous. He'd have to grow into it, the way he grew into everything. He closed his hands. The light went out. The dark was just the dark again, the sea, the stars, the quiet ship, the sleeping crew. He put his hat down over his face and leaned back and listened to the water moving under him. Somewhere out there, Aramaki was making his report. Somewhere above that, people were reading it and adjusting their responses. The world was turning toward him. Luffy smiled under his hat. Good, he thought. Let it come. Chapter 4. The Sea That Remembers the Dreams started 2 days after Kova. Not nightmares. Not the kind that left you cold and gasping. These were different, vast and slow, the way deep ocean is vast, with a quality of memory that didn't belong to Luffy but sat inside him now with the easy permanence of something that had always been there, and had simply been waiting to be acknowledged. He saw sky. Not the Grand Line sky with its particular lunacy of weather and atmosphere, but a different sky, wider, deeper, with a quality of light that had no analog in the world he knew. He saw figures moving in it, small against the scale of it, fighting with a kind of savage joy that was so familiar it ached. He saw a planet that wasn't his planet. He saw things he had no words for and woke up reaching for them. He didn't tell anyone about the dreams. Not because he was worried but because they didn't feel like a problem to solve. They felt like a thing happening, information arriving in the only format available, the language of someone who'd had a life so vast that even summarizing it required sleep and distance and time. Kyan's life. Or pieces of it. Not memories. Kyan had been specific about that. But the feeling of a life. The texture of what it was to be Saiyan. The particular quality of a body that had decided the concept of limits was something to study and then argue with. He'd wake up, stretch, feel the engine sitting steady in his chest, and go get food. On the 3rd morning after Kova, he woke from one of those dreams with a very specific understanding he hadn't had the night before. Not technique. Not power. More structural. The way the energy moved through him, the relationship between the gold light and his breathing, a particular quality of stillness that preceded the moments when the light burned brightest. He sat on the figurehead in the pre-dawn dark and breathed the way the dream had taught him, and the gold light came up through his skin like the sun coming up over water, slow and total and without urgency. He held it there, breathing. The light steadied, stopped flickering, became continuous, a sustained burn rather than a pulse. He could feel the difference immediately. The pulsing version had been him reaching for the power and getting it in waves, in surges, the way a strong current runs in bursts through a channel. This was him becoming the channel. Opening fully. The energy moving through him rather than being produced by him. The sea reflected it, gold on black water, before anyone else was awake, before any of the world had any opinions about it. Just Luffy and the water and the light that came out of him and went back into the dark. He breathed out. The light pulled back to its resting warmth. He said. He went to find breakfast. The island the log pose had been pointing toward was called Velt. It appeared on Nami's charts as a minor entry, significant magnetic field, some notation about unusual tidal patterns, a single trade route that passed near but didn't stop. Islands like that were either genuinely unimportant or very deliberately made to look that way. They were still 3 hours out when the ship appeared. A single vessel, no flag, running parallel to the Sunny's course at a distance of about 2 miles. Not approaching. Not retreating. Keeping pace. The kind of behavior that meant whoever was on it wanted to be seen but not engaged. A very particular kind of communication. Nami had the spyglass on it within minutes. Fast ship, she said. Unusual build, the hull geometry is wrong for a standard New World vessel. Reinforced for speed over capacity. She tracked it. And there's someone on the bow. Just standing there. Someone? Usopp said. One person. On the bow. Looking at us. She lowered the glass slowly. I can't see their face from here, but I can see their size and... She hesitated in a way that Nami didn't usually hesitate, with a small uncertain quality that meant she was revising an assumption in real time. I think I know that silhouette. Luffy was already at the railing. He had better eyes than most people gave him credit for, not technically, not in terms of visual acuity, but in the way that mattered, which was the ability to look at a thing and immediately see what it was. He looked at the figure on the distant bow for about 4 seconds. Katakuri, he said. The deck went quiet the way decks go quiet when someone says something that reconfigures the immediate future. Charlotte Katakuri, Nami said, the name coming out of her carefully, like she was handling something that had edges. Why is Charlotte Katakuri? He's been following us since Oros, Robin said. She was looking at the ship with an expression of scholarly interest that was doing a lot of work covering something more complicated. 3 days. He's been keeping his distance and maintaining pace. She turned. He could have caught us at any point. He chose not to. What does he want? Sanji said. He'd come on deck and was standing with his arms crossed and a cigarette and the particular stillness of someone who was running through tactical calculations but keeping their expression easy. To talk, Luffy said. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He did know it. He couldn't have explained the mechanism of knowing, but it was there. The same certainty he'd had about which way to run in 100 battles, the reading of intention that lived below the level of logic. Katakuri had his own code. He'd shown it in their fight in the mirror world, a man who wanted a real fight on fair terms even when unfair terms were completely available to him. He'd shown it when he woke Luffy up rather than finishing him. A person like that, following at a distance for 3 days and making no move, was making a statement about intent. Luffy cupped both hands around his mouth. Katakuri! Across 2 miles of ocean, the figure on the distant bow didn't move. Come over here if you want to talk. Nami put her face in her hands. He can't hear you from. The distant ship changed course. It came about smoothly, efficiently, and moved toward the Sunny with a directness that suggested Katakuri had, in fact, heard him, or at minimum had been waiting for something like permission and had taken this as close enough. He heard you, Usopp said, with the tone of someone who would never say I told you so because he had not, in fact, said anything, but was processing the universe's confirmation that Luffy operated on rules he didn't fully understand. Of course he did, Luffy said. Katakuri came over the water alone. He didn't use a boat. He walked it, hockey-hardened steps on the surface, that particular competence of a person for whom the sea's resistance was a detail rather than an obstacle. His scarf was up over the lower half of his face, which it always was. His arms were loose at his sides. He was very large. Being reminded of how large he was, in person, was a different thing than knowing it abstractly. He stopped at the Sunny's railing. Luffy was sitting on it. They looked at each other. This was not the first time they'd looked at each other after fighting to the point where most people would have been past looking at anything, but the quality of the look was different this time. Last time there'd been an urgency to it, immediate stakes, immediate consequences. This was something else. Two people taking stock across a larger distance than the water between them. Machi, Luffy said. Straw Hat, Katakuri said. His voice was what it always was, low, even, like a building that had decided to have opinions. You've been following us. Yes. Why? A pause. Katakuri looked past Luffy at the crew arrayed behind him, Zoro with a hand on his sword, Sanji with his cigarette going, Robin with her particular attention, the others in their various states of careful alertness. I want to see it for myself, Katakuri said. See what? The amber eyes moved back to Luffy's face. There was something in them, not something new, but something that had been there before and had grown, the way a crack in stone grows until the stone knows it entirely. What you're becoming. The deck was very quiet. Luffy looked at Katakuri for a moment. Then he swung his legs over the railing and dropped to the deck. Come on board. Luffy, Nami started. He came alone and he walked over. He's not here to fight. He looked back at her. If he wanted to fight, he would have done it 3 days ago. He looked at Katakuri. Right? Correct, Katakuri said. Nami made the face she made when she was angry about something that she couldn't actually argue with. She made it a lot when Luffy was involved. She stepped back and let it happen. Katakuri stepped over the railing and onto the Sunny's deck. The ship moved slightly with his weight. He stood on the deck and it was, objectively, not a small amount of person to have on a ship. He looked at the crew without hostility. They looked back without warmth, but without immediate aggression. Sanji flicked his cigarette over the railing. I'm not feeding him. You'd feed anyone, Luffy said. I'd feed anyone. I'm not feeding him. I didn't come to eat, Katakuri said. Good. Luffy sat cross-legged on the deck and looked up at Katakuri and patted the deck in front of him. It was an invitation so casual it wrapped around into sincerity. Katakuri looked at the deck. Then he sat down, not cross-legged. That architecture wasn't available to him in any comfortable configuration, but he settled, which for Katakuri was the equivalent. Zoro went and sat against the mast. He didn't put distance between himself and the conversation, but he put enough that it was his choice and everyone knew it. He closed his eyes. He wasn't sleeping. You heard about Kova, Luffy said. Not a question. I heard about Oro's first, Katakuri said. The light from your hands. Tashiro's fleet withdrawing. He looked at Luffy's hands, relaxed, open, resting on his knees. Then Kova. Aramaki's report is already circulating through channels that people like me have access to. A pause. He didn't use the word unprecedented. He used unclassified. In marine assessment language, that's worse. Because it means they don't have a box to put me in. Yes. Luffy thought about this without particular concern. What did the report say exactly? That your combat power exceeds previous assessment parameters by a margin that renders current countermeasures insufficient. Katakuri's voice was flat, reciting, but something under it was not flat at all. That the energy you're producing is a compound phenomenon, not purely devil fruit, not purely hockey, but something interacting at a level they don't have instrumentation for. He paused. And that the ceiling is undetermined. Kyan said there wasn't one? Luffy said. Kyan. Katakuri turned the name over. The one who gave you the fruit. Yeah. Luffy picked at a splinter on the deck absently. He was a Saiyan. A warrior from somewhere else. He put his whole species thing, the part where they get stronger from every fight, into a devil fruit and gave it to me. He looked up. I've been feeling it since the Nameless Island. Every real fight, I'm a different person after than I was before. Katakuri was quiet for a long time. On the mast, Zoro had opened one eye. Just one. He was listening. In our fight, Katakuri said. In Whole Cake Island. You woke up, yeah? You closed the gap. He said it without particular emotion, which meant he made peace with it, and was past the stage where it required emotion. Between what you were at the start of that fight, and what you were at the end. I'd never seen anyone do that. I'd never had a fight where the person I was fighting at the end was fundamentally different from the person I started with. He looked at Luffy directly. The amber eyes were very steady. I told my siblings you'd surpass me. I remember. I didn't know how fast. The ocean moved beneath the ship. Somewhere aft, Usopp dropped something small and metal and swore quietly. You could have killed me at the end, Luffy said. Not accusatory. Factual. Yes. But you didn't. No. Luffy looked at him. Why? Katakuri pulled his scarf up slightly, a habitual gesture, not hiding so much as settling, the way someone adjusts a coat collar in wind. He was quiet for long enough that the silence had its own weight. Because you were the first person who ever made me want to lose, he said. And then, before Luffy could respond, with a precision that said this was the actual thing. Not wanted me to lose. Made me want to. There's a difference. He looked at the deck. I spent my entire life being the one who couldn't be beaten. And I made that into something, a thing the family needed, a thing that kept people safe by being true. If I couldn't be beaten, then the people around me were protected. He paused. And then you happened. And you didn't know what to do with it, Luffy said. I didn't know what to do with it, Katakuri confirmed. I'd built my entire identity on an absolute, and you broke the absolute, and the identity. He didn't finish. Did it fall apart? No. Something in his expression, what you could see of it, was complicated and certain simultaneously. It changed. It became. He searched. Honest. It became honest. Luffy looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, Do you want to fight? Katakuri looked at him sharply. Not like, I don't mean. Luffy was already up, already rolling his shoulders, already looking at the deck space with an evaluating eye. I mean like. A real one. I want to see where you are. And I think you want to see where I am. On your ship. Yeah. In front of your crew. They've seen me fight before. Katakuri looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at the crew. Sanji was watching with an expression of barely concealed professional curiosity. Robin had her hands folded and was watching with full attention. Zoro had both eyes open now. Katakuri stood. He was extremely tall, standing. He rolled one shoulder. A sound came from it like timber adjusting. Not full power, he said. No, Luffy agreed. Calibrated. We're on a ship. Your crew stays back. Luffy looked at the crew. Stay back. Nami opened her mouth. Please, he added. She closed it. What happened on the Sunny's deck for the next 20 minutes was not a fight in the traditional sense of the word. It didn't have the shape of a fight, none of the escalation, the urgency, the goal-directed fury of actual combat. It had more the shape of a conversation, conducted in a language where the words were movement and impact and the grammar was instinct. Katakuri used his machi at a fraction of its capacity, enough to show form and intent without using the full devastating output he was capable of. His observation haki, legendarily perfect, caught half of what Luffy threw at him. The other half got through, because Luffy was fast enough now that the observation had to work to keep up, and that working was the thing Katakuri had come to see. Luffy didn't use the gold light at full. He used it the way he'd started using it in that early morning session, steady and controlled, the channel rather than the surge. What they found out, over those 20 minutes, was that they were different problems for each other than they'd been before. Katakuri had improved, not dramatically, but meaningfully, a person who takes a loss and uses it the way the Saiyan engine is designed to use loss, which is to say completely and without waste. He was better than Whole Cake Island. Luffy was simply somewhere else entirely. Not in a way that embarrassed Katakuri. In a way that Katakuri could measure and appreciate the way a craftsman appreciates a superior tool, with the precise, clear-eyed recognition of quality that has no ego in it. When they stopped, mutually, without signal, both of them stepping back at the same moment with the easy coordination of people who fight the same language, Katakuri stood and looked at Luffy with those amber eyes, and what lived in them was something Luffy didn't often see directed at himself. Respect. Not new, it had been there at Whole Cake Island's end. But it had depth now. It had had time to grow roots. There, Katakuri said. I needed to see that. Good? Luffy said. Good. He pulled his scarf back up. The world government is going to escalate. Aramaki going personally and withdrawing that won't stand in the ledger well. They'll compensate. By sending more? Luffy said. By sending different. Katakuri looked at the horizon. The 5 elders are paying attention. That's not a thing that ends quietly. It was never going to end quietly, Luffy said. He grinned. I'm not a quiet person. Katakuri made a sound. Low, almost inaudible, something that lived in the neighborhood of a laugh without fully committing to residency. No, he said. You're not. He moved back to the railing. Katakuri, Luffy said. He stopped. Thanks. For waking me up. In the mirror world. The amber eyes turned back to him. The scarf was up and the expression below it wasn't visible, but the eyes held something warm and complicated. The eyes of a man holding more than a single feeling about a single moment. Win, Katakuri said. Whatever's coming. Win it. He stepped off the railing and walked back across the water toward his ship. Luffy watched him go. Nami appeared at his shoulder with her arms crossed and the expression she had when she'd been holding herself back from saying several things and had selected the most important one. He's not wrong, she said. About the escalation. I know. The 5 elders, Luffy. That's not, I know, Nami. She looked at the side of his face. He was watching Katakuri's ship grow smaller as it turned south. His expression was calm in the way that meant he was actually thinking, not performing calm over anxiety. Are you scared? She asked. He looked at her. The same question the kid on the roof in Oro's had asked. Are you? He said. She held his gaze. A little. He nodded. Not dismissing it, not telling her not to be. Just acknowledging it as real. I'll make sure it's okay, he said. All of it. You can't promise that. Yeah, I can. He turned back to the sea. Watch me. Nami made a sound in her throat that she would describe, if asked, as exasperation, and which was actually something considerably more complex that she hadn't found a word for yet. She went back to her navigation. They reached Velt in the afternoon, and it was immediately clear why the log pose flagged it. The magnetic field was real and strange, and the island itself had the particular quality of places that had been shaped by something other than ordinary geological time. The stone formations on the coast were unusual. Tall, thin columns of dark rock rising from the water like a deliberate architecture, too regular to be random but too irregular to be constructed. The town was inland. The harbor was small. The people who came down to meet them were the kind that grew from hard circumstances. Direct eyes, practical clothing, the particular self-sufficiency of a community that had learned not to expect things from the outside world. They were also, it became immediately apparent, under no immediate external threat, which made Velt the first island in a while that Luffy arrived at without something immediately catching fire. He was profoundly uncertain what to do with this. We could just, Usopp gestured vaguely, exist here. For a bit. Without anything attacking us. That sounds fake, Luffy said. It's not fake. This is what some islands are like. Normal islands. Islands where we can eat and sleep and nobody shoots at us. Luffy looked at the town. The town looked back. It was a very normal-looking town. Okay, he said and walked into it. The crew spread out in the way they always did, Nami to the market, Robin to whatever passed for an archive or library, Zoro immediately finding a place to train without being asked where he was going, Usopp and Chopper in tow behind Luffy because those two were attached to him by some invisible thread. Frankie found the town's one engineer and they were involved in a deep professional conversation within 4 minutes. Sanji found the best restaurant and went in through the kitchen door. Velt turned out to be a place that made one specific thing well, a fermented fruit drink that Nami found extremely enjoyable and Luffy found confusing, and dried fish of a quality that made Sanji spend 20 minutes interrogating the method and taking notes. The people were not unfriendly. They'd heard things about the Straw Hats. The Grand Line carried information the way rivers carry sediment, slowly and everywhere, and they were more curious than afraid. Luffy ate 6 meals in the time they were on the island, which covered about 4 hours. Between the second and third meal he found a quiet space behind the town's water cistern, a stone shelf looking east, no buildings between it and the horizon, and he sat on it and did the breathing again. The thing he'd learned in the dream. The opening. The gold came up steady and full. He tried something he hadn't tried before. Instead of just holding it, he moved it, directed it, the way you'd direct a stream. Down his arm. Into a specific point in his fist. Concentrated it there, not burning, but dense. Packed. He held it, and felt the weight of it, not physical weight, but something analogous, a heaviness of potential. He released it into a single punch at the air. The air didn't appreciate this. The displacement was significant enough to knock loose stone off the cistern's lip and send it rattling down the eastern slope. The sound reached the town, and Usopp, somewhere in the market, said what was that with the automatic anxiety of someone who'd been conditioned by years of things going wrong. Chopper came around the corner of the cistern at a dead run. He found Luffy sitting on the stone shelf looking at his own fist with the expression of someone who has just received information they're still processing. What was that? Chopper demanded. Experimenting, Luffy said. Experimenting with what? Where to put the energy? He turned his fist over. I think I can focus it. Like, instead of it being everywhere, I can put it somewhere specific. Make that one point really heavy. Chopper stared at him. His medical brain and his friend brain were running simultaneously and reaching different conclusions. Is that safe? For me? For the things you hit with it? Luffy thought about this. Probably not. Chopper made the noise. The small boiling kettle noise. I'm fine, Luffy said. Come sit. Chopper came and sat. He had a medical bag because he always had a medical bag, and he clutched it the way someone clutches something familiar in an unfamiliar moment. He sat next to Luffy on the stone shelf and they looked at the eastern horizon together. Does it hurt? Chopper asked. More quietly. The doctor questioned, stripped of panic. No. Luffy felt for the right description. It's like, you know how when you've eaten a lot and you're really full and it's uncomfortable but also really good? Chopper nodded. Like that. But instead of in my stomach, it's everywhere. Chopper nodded slowly. Processing. His nose was twitching the way it did when he was paying close attention to something that was outside his existing categories. The fruit is changing you, he said. Not alarmed. Observational. Yeah. Physically. I've been checking, your baseline readings are different from what they were when we left Wano. Your body temperature runs slightly higher. Your resting heart rate is elevated, but your blood pressure is better than it's ever been. And he hesitated. Your skin does something when you're pushing the energy. Like it's thicker. Denser. Luffy looked at his arm. Normal looking arm. Is that bad? I don't know. Chopper said it honestly. I don't have any literature on this. You're the first person to eat 2 devil fruits that I know of, and one of them isn't. It's not from here. It's not from this world system. He pulled his knees up. I'm keeping notes. Every change I can measure, I'm writing down. Luffy looked at him. You're worried. I'm a doctor, Chopper said. I'm always worried. But specifically about this. Chopper was quiet. Then, you're my captain. And something is changing you that I don't fully understand. Yes. I'm specifically worried about this. Luffy put his hand on top of Chopper's head. Rested it there in the simple, easy way that said everything he needed to say without making Chopper have to perform being okay about it. It feels right, Luffy said. All of it. Like, it's not fighting me. The change. It's just happening, and my body is going with it. He felt for the engine, the steady, familiar warmth of it. It's mine now. I can feel that. It's mine. Chopper breathed. Okay, he said. Okay. But you tell me if that changes. If anything hurts or feels wrong. Yeah. I mean it. I know. They sat on the stone shelf and looked at the horizon until the light started doing the things it did before sunset, going from direct to diffuse. And then Luffy stood and stretched every limb in every direction simultaneously because he could and it felt good, and Chopper stood and straightened his hat, and they went back to the town for the third meal. The assassins arrived after dark. Not Marine. That was the first thing Nami clocked when the alert came. Not Marine, not regular fleet, not the organized state violence they'd been dealing with since Oro's. These were different. 8 individuals, civilian dress, arriving on the island by small, fast, dark-hulled craft that had been running without lights. They'd come in from the north while everyone's attention was on the harbor. Velt's lookout post caught them. A young man with a bell and the admirable professional commitment to actually watch the water at night rather than just claiming he was. He rang the bell twice and then wisely got off the post and went somewhere with walls. The crew assembled fast. Years of this, assembling fast was as automatic as breathing. Luffy was at the town's northern edge within 90 seconds. The 8 figures had already come over the beach and were moving through the dark toward the town with the particular body language of people who had done this before and had a specific target in mind. They saw Luffy. They stopped. He could see them clearly in the dark. His eyes had gotten better since the fruit, or more accurately his ability to read the information his eyes had always been capable of gathering had improved. 8 people. Weapons, not standard issue, not Marine catalog. Custom. Expensive. The weapons of people who were paid well enough to source their own. One of them said something to the others. Low, in a language Luffy didn't speak, but the tone was recognizable in any language. Change of plan. They came at him from 4 directions. These were not ordinary fighters. He felt it immediately, the quality of their haki, the precision of their movement, the way they communicated without speaking, the coordination of people who had trained for exactly this kind of engagement. Someone had sent serious people. Someone had spent serious resources. The 5 elders, Katakuri had said. Paying attention. The first 2 reached him simultaneously from the left and right, weapons moving with a speed and coordination that would have been genuinely dangerous to almost anyone else. Luffy moved between them, not backward, forward, through the gap between them, rubber thin for the fraction of a second it required, and the 2 weapons hit each other instead of him with a clang and a spray of sparks. He came back around on the first one, a single punch, no gold light, he didn't need it, and the assassin went down and didn't get back up. The second got a kick that sent them into the third. 2 down. The other 6 adjusted. They'd seen enough to know this wasn't going to work at any standard calibration, and they escalated, 2 of them producing something that wasn't a weapon in the conventional sense but produced a field, a haki-disrupting field, the kind of specialized equipment that cost more than most ships. They activated it, and the haki in the immediate area became muddy, interfered with, like static across a signal. Luffy felt it. His haki dulled at the edges. The gold light didn't. He let it come up, full and steady, the channel open, and the field met it, and the field lost. The equipment cracked, actually cracked, the housing developing fractures from the pressure of what it was trying to affect and failing, and then failed, sparks and dead weight in the hands of the two who were holding it. 4 of the remaining 6 hit him at once. He took it. Stood there and took it, all 4, weapons and haki-enhanced strikes from people who were genuinely excellent, and he absorbed every impact the way rubber absorbed everything. He felt each one hit the engine and feed it. His temperature went up a degree. The gold light intensified. He breathed out. The 4 who'd hit him, and the 2 with the broken equipment, and the 1 who'd been waiting for an angle, they were all at varying distances from him, scattered in their post-attack positions. He was in the middle of them. The exhale carried the gold light out in a single pulse, not aggressive, not targeted, just present, the way the sun is present when cloud cover breaks. It hit the immediate area with a force that was more pressure than impact, and the 7 remaining assassins, all 7 of them, excellent fighters, all staggered. Just staggered. Like walking into a wall made of heat and light. It was over in the next 30 seconds. Not through any elaborate technique. Luffy just moved through them with his hands lit, and his body going where it went, and each contact put someone down. Not killed. He was careful about that. These people were sent, they were doing a job, killing them wasn't the answer. He stood in the middle of them all, lying on the northern beach, and looked at them. Zoro appeared out of the dark at his left. He hadn't been needed. He'd been there anyway. 8. Zoro said, looking at the beach. Yeah. Government? Has to be. Luffy looked up at the dark. The stars were out in force, the Grand Lion sky doing its chaotic gorgeous thing. Katakuri was right. He was. They're going to keep sending people. Probably. Luffy looked at the beach. The assassins were breathing. Some of them were moving slightly. None of them were going to be a problem tonight. We should leave before they wake up, Luffy said. Already told Nami. Zoro sheathed one sword. She's got the route. Did she yell? At you? No. At the general situation? For about 30 seconds. He paused. She packed us food. Luffy looked at him. Really? She told Sanji to pack food. Same thing. They walked back through the dark town toward the harbor. Veld was quiet. The alert had cleared most people inside, and the brief violent sounds from the north had confirmed that staying inside was the right call. The people of Veld had survived by reading situations accurately, and this one read straightforwardly enough. On the Sunny, the crew was mid-departure, Frankie at the helm, Nami with the charts, Robin casting off the dock lines with extra hands that bloomed from the pier like flowers and fast-forward. Luffy climbed aboard. Usopp was at the railing and watched him come over with an expression that was working very hard at calm. Did you? Usopp started. 8. Luffy said. 8 assassins? Yeah. Were they how fine? Luffy reached past him for the plate of food that was, as Zoro had indicated, sitting on the railing next to the captain's spot at the figurehead. He took it. Looked at it. It was a very good arrangement of food. Sanji had made something specific, not just thrown provisions together, had actually cooked for departure, which was a different thing entirely and meant something about the state of Sanji's feelings. Tell Sanji thanks, he said. Tell him yourself, Usopp said. He's right behind you. Luffy turned around. Sanji was leaning against the mast with his arms crossed, and the particular expression that his face made when his emotions were doing something that his attitude wasn't going to acknowledge. Thanks, Luffy said. Eat it before it gets cold, Sanji said. Luffy ate it before it got cold. The Sunny moved out of Veld's harbor into the open water, the island going dark behind them as they cleared the magnetic field, and the night took over. Nami had a course, east and north, the next log pose target, the next thing, always the next thing. Luffy sat at the figurehead in the dark with the empty plate, and felt the engine running its quiet revolution, and thought about the 8 people on the beach who had been sent specifically for him by people who operated in rooms without windows and made decisions about the world with the ease of people who'd been making them for so long they'd forgotten the decisions had weight. They were paying attention. Good. He thought about the gold light going through the hockey disruption field and the field cracking. He thought about the way the pulse had landed, involuntary, intuitive, the engine doing something without being told. He thought about what it would look like when it was fully his, when the instinct and the choice were the same thing, when he could do that with intention what he'd done tonight with breath. He thought about Im-sama, in the deepest room, making marks on a map. He thought about a future that was coming toward him at the same speed he was moving toward it. He wasn't afraid. He was, if anything, hungry. In the way that had nothing to do with food, the deep Saiyan hunger that Kaien had said was written in the blood, the hunger for what came next, for the next wall, the next ceiling, the next skin to shed. He reached for the gold light, and it came up warm in his hands and he looked at it in the dark, the way the sea reflected it, and he thought about what Kaien had said about science. The absolute refusal, written into the body itself, to be defeated and remain defeated. He closed his hands. The sea went dark again. But the warmth stayed. It always stayed now. He put his hat over his face and leaned back against the figurehead and listened to the water and the ship and the sleeping sounds of his crew, and felt the world's attention like a physical weight, like a hand pressed against the chest. He smiled under his hat. Come on, then, he thought. Let's see what you've got. Chapter 5: What Kings Are Made of. The 5 elders met at dawn. Not their usual dawn. This one had a quality of urgency beneath its ceremony, the way a formal dinner feels different when the host is afraid. They sat in their high room with their high window and their high opinions of their own judgment, and they looked at the reports spread across the table between them, and they did not speak for a long time. The reports covered Oro's, Kova, Velt. They covered Tashiro's filed assessment and Aramaki's personal brief. Rare, that, Aramaki writing his own brief rather than delegating, which meant the information was too sensitive and too specific for him to trust to anyone else's language. They covered the Velt assassination team's failure, reported by the single member conscious enough to transmit at dawn. The eldest of the 5 elders turned one page over. Set it face down. He's accelerating, one of them said. Every engagement makes him stronger, said another. That was always the risk with the Nika fruit. We knew what it was. We spent 800 years making sure nobody. This is different from Nika, the first one said. He turned another page. Set it face down. Read Aramaki's description of the energy. That is not solely the Nika fruit. Something has been added. He looked at the others. Something with no ceiling. The room was quiet. Outside the high window, the sky was going from black to the gray that preceded color. Somewhere below and enormously far away, a sea was moving and a ship was moving through it, and a person was sitting at that ship's bow in the dark with gold light in his hands. We mobilized the Seraphim, one elder said. The Seraphim are assets. Strategic. This is strategic. We send all 5? A pause. We send the one that's relevant, the eldest said. He folded his hands on the table. His voice was very quiet and very final, the voice of a man who has made decisions like this for so long that the weight of them no longer registers on his face. And we send Aramaki again. With full authorization. He looked around the table. No withdrawal conditions this time. The others looked at each other. And if that's insufficient? Someone asked. The eldest looked at the window. At the lightning sky. At the distance between this room and that ship. Then we deal with it personally, he said. As we have dealt with things before. Nobody argued. The meeting was over in 10 minutes. The orders went out before the sun fully cleared the horizon. The island of Garen was 3 days from Velt, and the log pose hit it like a compass needle finding north. Definitive, urgent, the pull of it stronger than anything Nami had logged since Fishman Island. The island itself was massive by New World standards, A true landmass rather than the scattered mid-sized islands that made up most of the Grand Line's upper reaches. Mountains visible from 40 miles out. A coastline that went on for hours. 2 ports, north and south, both large. They came in from the west because the log pose pulled that direction, and Nami trusted her log pose above most other things in the world. What they found from the west was a battle already in progress. The western port, a large fishing and trade harbor, the kind that had been operating for 100 years and had the particular confident infrastructure of places that expected to keep operating, was under assault from the sea. Not a marine fleet. Something different. Nami had the spyglass up and then handed it to Robin without a word because Robin would clock the specifics faster. Robin looked through it for exactly 7 seconds. "Seraphim," she said. The deck went quiet the way it had gone quiet when Katakuri's name came up, but with a different quality. Katakuri was known. The Seraphim were known differently, not as people but as weapons. Weapons built from the templates of the warlords, the 7 under the old system, enhanced beyond the originals in every metric. They weren't people who could be negotiated with or read or respected into a corner. They were instruments of a will that lived several rungs above anything that could be bargained with. "Which one?" Nami said. "S-Hawk," Robin said. "The Mihawk type." Usopp sat down on the deck without deciding to. S-Hawk was in the harbor. Not fighting the port's defenses. The port's defenses were already finished, already scattered, ships burning at their moorings, dock infrastructure coming apart, undercuts so precise and complete they looked like the harbor had been surgically altered. The Seraphim was moving through the burning harbor with the mechanical efficiency of something that did not have to think about what it was doing because the doing was everything it was. People were running. The harbor's population moving away from the water in waves, the organized panic of people who had made the calculation that staying was not survivable. Luffy was at the railing. He looked at the harbor. At the burning ships. At the people running. At the sleek, white uniformed figure moving through the fire with its enormous blade. His expression was very calm. "Take us in," he said. "Luffy," Nami started. "Nami." He looked at her. "Take us in." She looked back at him. At the gold that was already present in his eyes, not aggressive, not wild, just there, lit from somewhere that didn't need the fight to start before it showed up. Already ready. Already decided. She took them in. The Sunny came into the western harbor with Frankie driving her hard and the crew at stations. The burning ship to port listed and groaned. The smell of smoke and seawater hit them as they cleared the harbor mouth. A good smell to either of those things, the smell of something built being unmade. S-Hawk noticed them. It stopped, mid-movement, that particular precision of a thing whose attention has been redirected. It stood on the burning hull of a fishing vessel and looked at the Sunny coming in, and its head tilted a few degrees, the gesture of something calculating rather than recognizing. Then its eyes found Luffy at the bow. Something in its posture shifted. A targeting adjustment. The Seraphim had been deployed for a reason, and the reason was now approximately 300 meters away, and closing. "Everyone off the ship," Luffy said. "Luffy," Zoro started. "Not off the island. Off the ship." He turned around. "Frankie, get the Sunny out to open water. Keep her safe." He looked at the crew, each of them, individually, the way he did in the moments that mattered, the actual direct look that meant he was seeing them and not just the room they were in. "Help the people in the harbor. Get them clear. All of you." "And you?" Nami said. "I'm going to talk to the bird." "It's not a bird, it's a—" He was already over the railing. He landed on a burning dock in a crouch and came up facing the Seraphim across 60 meters of harbor. S-Hawk had come off the fishing hull. It was on the dock now, blade at its side, standing in the fire without being burned because fire was not one of the things it was designed to worry about. Luffy straightened. Rolled his shoulders. S-Hawk moved. The speed was extraordinary even knowing it was coming, the kind of speed that existed at the edge of what the eye could track, a cut that arrived faster than the decision to make it. The blade came in a horizontal arc at center mass, a blow that would have split almost anything. Luffy wasn't there. He'd gone up, straight up, both arms pulling from a dock post above him, the rubber launch sending him vertical out of the ark's path. He came back down behind the Seraphim and hit it in the back with both feet, a drop kick with everything he had behind it, gold blazing through his legs. S-Hawk went forward. 3 full steps, which was 3 more steps than anyone had forced out of it in its operational history. It turned, and its eyes, those cold, beautiful, entirely empty eyes, registered Luffy with something that wasn't emotion but was its mechanical equivalent. A recalibration. Then it came at him properly. What followed was fast. Genuinely, incomprehensibly fast, the kind of fight that the people still in the harbor caught glimpses of between running, and what they glimpsed was motion and light and sound, the gold of Luffy's energy, and the cold flash of S-Hawk's blade, and the impacts that sent shockwaves through the harbor water and made the burning ships rock at their moorings. S-Hawk was extraordinary. The Mihawk template, taken to its absolute ceiling and then pushed past it, the swordsmanship was perfect in a way that had nothing human in it precisely because it didn't have to make the compromises that humanity required. No fatigue. No doubt. No wasted motion. Every cut was exactly what it needed to be, exactly where it needed to go, at exactly the speed and angle that maximized the probability of it achieving its purpose. Luffy's rubber body ate the cuts that landed. The blade drew bright lines that closed immediately, the rubber healing its geometry, the impact absorbed and returned. But S-Hawk was learning. The Seraphim weren't just instruments of force, they were instruments of intelligence, and the intelligence recalibrated rapidly, adjusting the angles, changing the timing, looking for the combination that rubber didn't solve. Luffy was also learning. The engine was running, had been running since they entered the harbor, fed by the urgency of the people running, the burning ships, the hot anger of watching something mechanical tear apart a place that people lived. It was at a higher pitch than Kova. Higher than anything since the Nameless Island. He could feel the next thing. Not like the first Super Saiyan shift he'd touched during the Kova fight. That had been raw, half-controlled, the engine throwing a circuit breaker. This was different. This was built. 3 days of breathing, of directing the flow, of learning the channel. This was 3 days of that work arriving at a point where it had something real to meet. S-Hawk came in with a cut that was different from the others. The blade's trajectory bent, the seastone edge catching the dock's own reflection to mask the angle change. Clever. A cut designed for someone who was fast enough to read straight trajectories. It caught Luffy across the shoulder. Not deep, rubber turned it, but it landed, and the seastone quality of the blade made the contact point sting with something that was almost nausea, the sea's antibiotic against devil fruit users. Luffy felt it. He also felt what happened immediately after. The engine answered the seastone contact with a heat so sharp and immediate it surprised even him, the Saiyan mechanism's particular response to being hurt, the thing Kayan had described as the fundamental writing of the blood, triggering with a vividness that was almost clarifying. His temperature spiked. He felt it in his palms, his spine, the back of his skull. He breathed. In. Channel open. Everything open. All of it. The gold came up. Not the way it had before. Not pooling or flowing or building gradually. It detonated. There was no other word. It went from contained to complete in a single breath, filling him from the floor of whatever he was up to the ceiling that didn't exist, and the ceiling not existing was the point. That was the whole point. That was what Kayan had spent 20 years putting into a fruit and waiting for the right person to eat. The harbor went white. Not literally. The fire was still the fire, the smoke was still the smoke. But the quality of the light coming off Luffy turned white gold, blinding at the center, like a star deciding to become aware of its own output. His hair lifted. Not slightly, completely. Straight up, as if gravity had received a memo about a change in policy. His eyes went fully gold, the brown entirely replaced by something luminous and ancient and absolutely wide awake. S-Hawk stopped. The Seraphim's combat intelligence was processing something it didn't have a category for. Not because the power output exceeded its measurement capacity, It had measurement capacity for extraordinary things, but because what it was measuring was changing while it measured it, continuously, like trying to weigh something that got heavier the longer you looked at it. Luffy looked at the seraphim. His voice, when he spoke, was his. Entirely his, still warm, still round at the edges, still carrying that particular quality that had nothing to do with intimidation and everything to do with the kind of certainty that doesn't need to be loud. But there was something behind it, deeper, the resonant bass of the engine fully open. "You're not going to cut anything else today," he said. S-Hawk moved. The cut was extraordinary. The single best cut the seraphim had thrown, the accumulated learning of the entire fight, every adaptation, every recalibration, resolved into one final answer. It came at Luffy from 3 simultaneous angles, the blade moving at speeds that were genuinely at the limit of what was physically expressible, targeting points that should have been unreachable by rubber and unavoidable by anything less. Luffy caught it. Not blocked. Not deflected. He reached out with one hand and caught the blade between his fingers and held it. The sea stone edge made his fingers scream, genuine pain, real and immediate, and he held it anyway with the absolute refusal of someone for whom letting go had never really been one of the available options. The harbor was very quiet except for fire. S-Hawk applied force to the blade. More force. The kind of force that would have moved mountains, quantitatively speaking. The blade didn't move. Luffy's fingers held. He looked at the seraphim over the frozen blade. It looked back at him with those empty, calibrating eyes. "Stop," he said. Something in the seraphim's operational logic encountered a decision tree it hadn't been programmed for. It had orders. It had targets. It had capabilities. What it had encountered was something that sat outside all 3 of those things, a force of will so complete and unhesitating that its operational logic, which was designed to route around resistance, couldn't find the route because the resistance wasn't resistance, it was a wall that went all the way down. S-Hawk stopped applying force to the blade. Luffy let go. He stepped back. The white gold was still running over him in slow continuous waves, his hair still vertical, his eyes still fully lit. He pointed at the harbor mouth. "Go," he said. "Tell them what you saw." S-Hawk looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then it turned, walked to the harbor's edge, and stepped into the water and was gone, moving south with a speed that left a brief wake. Luffy stood in the burning harbor and breathed. The white gold eased down. Slowly. Like a tide going out, the same tide, the same force, receding back to the level it rested at between the moments when everything was needed. His hair settled. His eyes shifted back through the brightness to the regular warm brown of his irises. He rolled his shoulder where the sea stone had caught him. It was sore. It would be sore tomorrow. He didn't particularly care. The crew came back. They'd done what they always did, each of them, without instruction or coordination beyond what they'd built over years, doing exactly what the situation needed. Zoro had taken the harbor's northern dock where a cluster of panicked people were cut off by fire, and had cut the fire. Not put it out, cut the path it was spreading along, removing the dock sections it needed to travel, with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to enemies. Nami had used her climb attack to pull moisture from the harbor air into the burning buildings, buying time. Robin had used her arms to carry people, children first, then elderly, blooming hands lifting and passing and placing with the calm efficiency of someone with infinite patience and 40 arms to spare. Usopp had provided cover and guidance from the harbor master's tower, his voice carrying over the chaos with the one thing it was always genuinely, unreservedly good at, which was getting people to listen and move. Chopper had found the harbor's medical station and had it operational within minutes, which was extremely Chopper. Frankie had kept the Sunny safe and had also, at some point, used General Frankie's arm cannon to redirect a piece of burning debris that was heading for a crowded evacuation point, which he described afterward as a precision operation and which had in fact been very precise. By the time Luffy walked off the burning dock and into the harbor's main square, the chaos had resolved into the organized aftermath of chaos, the slightly better situation, where things were still bad but were bad in a controllable direction rather than an escalating one. He found Nami first. She was standing at the harbor square's center, climate act in hand, directing people who'd just decided she was the most authoritative presence in the immediate area, which was accurate. She saw him coming and her eyes went over him, the shoulder, his hands, his face, with the rapid clinical inventory of someone who needed to know the damage before she could stop worrying. "The sea stone catch," he said before she could ask. "Let me see." "It's fine." "Let me see, Luffy." He let her see. She looked at his shoulder, the place the blade had grazed, the rubber having sealed the surface but the deep sea stone nausea still working its way through the local tissue. She pressed 2 fingers against it. He made a face. "Chopper," she said, not loudly but in the tone that went to the right ears. Chopper was there in about 20 seconds. While Chopper worked, the crew assembled around him in the gradual way they assembled, not called, not organized, just gravitating, the natural physics of people who belonged in the same space finding that space. Zoro had a new cut across his ribs from the dock section work. He hadn't mentioned it. Sanji had appeared from somewhere with food, where, nobody asked, because some competencies you just accepted, and was distributing it to harbor workers and evacuees with the systematic care of someone who understood hunger as a category of emergency. "S-Hawk is gone," Robin said. She'd appeared at Luffy's left with a book in one hand that she hadn't been carrying before, sourced from somewhere during the chaos, which was extremely Robin. "Yeah," Luffy said. Chopper made a disapproving noise at something and pressed something cold against the shoulder. "I told it to go back and tell them what it saw." "You let it go," Zoro said. "It was done. It wasn't going to do anything else and killing it didn't." He paused. "It's not alive. But it's not alive either. Felt wrong to just, I know," Zoro said. Not the I know of agreement exactly. The I know of someone who recognized the logic and was filed it. "They'll know now," Nami said. "Whatever the Seraphim saw, whatever its reporting tells them, they'll know I'm here," Luffy said. "Good. Luffy. Nami. They sent it to make a point. I made one back." He looked at her steadily. "This is how it's going to go. They keep making moves, I keep answering them. That's the fight. I'm not hiding from it." Nami looked at him. The harbor was busy around them, people moving, fire dying down, the organized sound of a community dealing with damage in the practical, determined way of people who'd built something and intended to keep it. The smoke was thinning. "You were different," she said. "In the harbor. The light was, yeah? Is that the next thing?" he said. "I think that's the next thing." She looked at him for a long moment. At his eyes, normal now, warm and present, looking back at her with the attention he always paid to people when he was actually listening. She thought about the moment in the harbor when the white gold had gone off and the harbor had looked like something was being born in it, and she thought about being afraid. And she thought about the 8 years she'd known this person and the fact that the fear had never once convinced her to go somewhere else. She turned back to directing people. That was her version of okay. He knew it. He let it be what it was. Garan's western port had a governor's residence at the top of a hill above the harbor district, a large, solid building that had been repurposed from its original administrative function into something closer to a community center over the years. The way practical places repurpose themselves when the thing they were built for changes. It had a wide terrace overlooking the harbor and the sea, and by evening the crew was on that terrace because the governor, a direct woman named Castellan who had run the island for 12 years and didn't see the point in pretending to be anything other than what she was, had invited them and fed them and was now sitting at the far end of the terrace looking at the harbor with the expression of someone calculating the cost of repairs. "Second time in a year," Castellan said. She had a glass of something in her hand and wasn't drinking it. "Marine presence increases, we see more of this." She meant the burning. The damage. The way power showed up looking for other power and left the place where it happened worse than it found it. "The government is supposed to protect us." "The government protects itself," Robin said. "Yes. Castellan looked at her. I've noticed. Luffy was at the terrace railing, eating his 7th meal of the day. The harbor below was lit with work lights. The town had already started clearing debris, the fishermen's cooperative organizing their equipment into repair brigades with the efficiency of people for whom the sea's disasters were familiar enough to have protocols. He watched it and felt something that wasn't the engine, the simpler, older warmth of watching people do the thing that people did, which was get back up. Is it going to happen again? Castellan said. She was talking to Luffy. She'd worked out within the first hour which one mattered for this particular question. Yeah, Luffy said. She nodded. Like she'd known and was asking for the confirmation rather than the information. But the next time something like that comes, he said, I'll be more ready than I was today. Castellan looked at him. You stopped it today. Almost wasn't enough today. The almost matters less than the stop. She finally drank from her glass. You should sleep. Both ports have extra watches tonight, and my people know to signal if anything comes in. Luffy ate the last of his food and considered the night sky above the harbor. The stars had come out, and the Grand Line's atmosphere was doing something beautiful with them, extra vivid, the kind of sky that looked edited, like someone had turned up the contrast. Hey, he said. The crew looked at him. You were all good today, he said. All of it. Everyone. Usopp made an undignified sound. Chopper made a dignified sound that was ruined by how high-pitched it was. Frankie said super at the volume level that was his natural speaking voice. Sanji turned away and appeared to be looking at something very interesting on the wall. Zoro said nothing, which meant everything. Nami said, Don't thank us for doing our jobs. But she said it quietly and without heat, which meant the same thing Zoro's silence meant. Robin smiled at her book. Brook, who had come ashore at some point during the cleanup and had spent several hours playing his violin for evacuated people and children in the harbor square, played a single chord from somewhere inside the residence and called, Yo-ho-ho-ho! They went to sleep. Not in the residence. The crew slept on the ship, always, the Sunny being as much home as destination. But they went to sleep with the ease of people who had done something real that day and knew it. Luffy lay on the Sunny's deck rather than going below and looked at the sky and let the engine run its quiet revolution in his chest and thought about the harbor. The white gold. He'd touched something today that he'd only grazed in Kova. Not the same thing. He understood the distinction better now that he'd been fully inside it rather than on its edge. In Kova it had been the engine redlining, pushing past the threshold by necessity and raw output. Today had been different. Today had been the channel fully open, the thing he'd been practicing with the morning breathing, the deliberate learning of how to be the thing rather than produce the thing. He held his hand up against the stars. The gold came. Steady. Warm. His. He could feel the shape of where it was going, not fully, not in detail, but the way you feel a room's dimensions in the dark. It was bigger than what he'd done today. It was bigger than anything he'd done yet. And it didn't feel distant. It felt like the next breath after this one. He thought about S-Hawk stopping. The blade held between his fingers. The Seraphim's targeting logic encountering something it couldn't route around. He thought about what it had felt like to say stop and have it be enough. He closed his hand. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. The 5 elders would respond. Aramaki would come with full authorization, whatever that meant. Nothing good, most likely. The world's machinery would keep turning in the direction it always turned, which was toward the consolidation of power in the hands of people who believed they should have it. And he would keep being in the way. He smiled. He was very good at being in the way. Aramaki came at noon the next day. He came from the east, alone, walking across the open water the way he'd walked across it at Oro's. The same controlled, unhurried approach of a man who had calculated that hurrying was unnecessary. His coat was intact, new coat, or repaired, the chest no longer shredded from Kova. His sword was at his hip. He stopped 100 meters from the Sunny, which was docked at the Western Harbor's repaired north slip. The crew was on deck. All of them. They'd seen him coming on Nami's weather eye and they'd assembled without being told because they were the Straw Hats, and this was what they did. Luffy was at the bow. Full authorization, he called, across the 100 meters of water. Aramaki looked at him. Yes. What does that mean? It means I'm not going home without a result. Aramaki's voice carried flat and clear. And it means everything I held back at Kova is available today. Luffy looked at him. At the green coat, the sword, the flat assessing eyes. At the man underneath those things. The genuine true believer, the person who thought the world needed pruning and had decided he was the right tool for it. I'm not going to fight you here, Luffy said. Something shifted in Aramaki's expression. Not in the harbor, Luffy continued. These people just fixed their docks. He stepped off the Sunny's bow onto the water, hockey-hardened steps, same as Aramaki's, and walked out to meet him. Away from the town. Aramaki studied him. East, Aramaki said. There's open plateau 2 miles inland. Fine. They went. Side by side, not talking, through the harbor and up the road that led from the port into the island's interior. Garen's interior was all long grass and basalt plateaus, geologically dramatic, visually extraordinary, empty of population for the 2 miles between the coastal town and the first inland settlement. The plateau opened up before them. Wide, flat-topped, the long grass reduced to scrub at this elevation, the sky absolutely enormous above it. The kind of space that told you the exact size of things by giving you nothing to measure against. They stopped. Turned to face each other. Aramaki rolled his shoulders, subtle, a preparation, the kind of physical adjustment that came before someone fully committed. Before this starts, he said. Luffy waited. I read S-Hawk's operational report from yesterday. He paused. The blade catch. The yield command. He looked at Luffy with those flat, measuring eyes. You told it to report what it saw. Yeah. Why? Luffy thought about it. Genuinely thought about it, because the question deserved a real answer. Because the people above you need to understand what's actually happening. He said. They're making decisions about me based on old information. I wanted them to have new information. Aramaki was quiet for a moment. And what is actually happening? He said. I'm getting stronger. Luffy said. Every time someone like you, or something like that Seraphim, pushes me, I come out the other side more than I was before. That's just what I am now. He looked at Aramaki. The 5 elders think they can stop it. They're wrong. And the more they try, the more wrong they're going to get. Aramaki looked at him for a long time. I believe you, he said. And then, without any particular change in expression. It doesn't change what I'm here to do. I know, Luffy said. That's the difference between us. What is? You believe something and keep doing it even when the evidence says you should stop. Luffy looked at him. I keep doing it because the evidence says I should. Those aren't the same thing. Something moved in Aramaki's face. A complicated movement, not anger, not dismissal. Something more genuine than either. You might be right, he said. Let's find out. The vines erupted. Aramaki at full authorization was not Aramaki at Kova. The difference was immediately and completely clear. The scale of growth was different, the speed was different, the density and coordination of it was different. He'd been managing himself at Kova, holding back not from uncertainty but from a genuine operational calculation that the situation hadn't yet required full output. Now it required it. Now the vines came from the basalt itself, splitting stone with root systems that moved at animal speed, and the tree eruptions were larger and faster, and the wood they produced was harder than anything Luffy had encountered in their first fight. He also produced a wall. Not a cage. A wall. A solid curtain of compressed wood from one end of the plateau to the other, forcing Luffy into a smaller space, taking away the lateral movement. Behind that wall, more growth, a secondary layer, and a third, the plateau being remodeled in real time into an enclosed space where Aramaki's control of the environment was absolute. Luffy looked at the wall. He breathed. The gold came up. Channel open. Everything available. He'd had one night of sleep and a morning of breathing practice and every fight since the nameless island, and all of it was right there, right now, the full sum of what he'd been building. He hit the wall. The impact was different from anything he'd done before. The focused concentration technique he'd tested on Velt, the dense packed point, but larger now, the entire trained capacity of it, both arms, both fists, the gold driving in ahead of the rubber mass. The wall didn't just break. It went. A 15-meter section of it went from existing to not, the wood reducing to splinters that hung in the air for a moment before the shockwave from the impact carried them outward. Aramaki stared at the gap. Luffy was already through it. What followed was the full fight, not the feeling out of Oros, not the geometric exercise of Kova. This was everything both of them had, on a plateau with enough space for everything both of them had, and neither of them holding anything in reserve. Aramaki's vines reached and Luffy moved. Luffy punched and Aramaki grew shields. Aramaki contained and Luffy exploded out of the containment. Back and forth, each exchange feeding the engine feeding the output escalating the next exchange. On the 7th exchange, Aramaki did something new. He grew himself. Not a metaphor, he integrated the wood into his own body, the bark climbing his arms and chest and legs, thickening him, a living armor of his own medium. His own moving forest, worn. He was 3 times his normal size when it finished, and he swung a vine-armored arm at Luffy with the weight of a falling tree. Luffy took it. He let it hit him. Took the full impact, feet sliding back across the basalt, the gold light spiking white at the contact. He felt it, the weight of it, the sheer mass, the hit that would have ended anything that wasn't him. He felt it run through his body and into the engine and out the other side as heat and acceleration. He planted his feet. He grinned. The white gold was back, not the first detonation from the harbor, not the controlled burn from Kova. Both. The deliberate channel wide open and the engine at full revolution simultaneously, the two things working together as a single expression rather than competing modes. His hair went up. His eyes lit fully. The basalt under his feet cracked from the ambient output. He was burning. Not destructively. Like a star burns, continuously, totally, without any intention of stopping because stopping wasn't in the vocabulary. Aramaki looked at him through the armored wood of his own body. Luffy moved. 3 punches. Left, right, both together. Each one gold-lit and packed and precise, hitting the armor at the same point in rapid succession, not trying to break it on the first hit, breaking it on the third hit landing on stone instead of wood and then the 4th, unarmored, direct. Aramaki went back. Not staggered. He went back, fully, completely, leaving a line in the basalt from his feet, the wood armor cracking and partially dissolving as his focus distributed between impact absorption and maintaining the growth. He hit the far edge of the plateau and stopped with bedrock behind him. He was breathing. Luffy walked toward him. Not slowly. At a normal pace. The white gold continuous, his hair still vertical, his eyes still fully illuminated. Aramaki raised one arm. Vines came, last effort, real effort, everything he had left in the immediate term. They were still extraordinary. They would have been enough for almost anything. Luffy caught the lead vine with one hand. The hand blazed. The vine stopped growing. The part he was holding went still, the growth arrested, and from the point of his grip it dried outward, not killed, but paused, the force of what he was outputting simply overriding the power driving the growth. He looked at Aramaki over the frozen vine. Full authorization, Luffy said. Aramaki was still. His coat was damaged. The wood armor was falling away, drying to dust in pieces. His face was, not defeated, not broken, but arrived at a place. A place that cost something to arrive at and wasn't comfortable. Yes, Aramaki said. And it's not enough. A pause. No, Aramaki said. It's not enough. Luffy released the vine. He let it fall. Tell them, he said. Tell them it's not enough. Tell them what you saw. He stepped back. And tell them that the next time they send someone to these islands, to these people's homes, I'm going to answer it the same way. Every time. Aramaki looked at him. The measuring eyes, measuring something different now, something they hadn't had the parameters for before today, and were building the parameters for in real time. The 5 elders won't stop, Aramaki said. I know. They'll come directly. Eventually. I know. Luffy put his hat back on where it had fallen in the early exchanges. Pressed the brim. That's fine. Aramaki breathed. The dying wood continued to fall around him in slow pieces. I am going to ask you something, he said. His voice was quieter now. Not soft. Aramaki was not a soft man, but lower, stripped of the authority register, speaking from somewhere more personal. Okay, Luffy said. Is there? He stopped. Started again. What I've built my life around, the idea that order protects more than it costs. That the structure of the world government, for all its failures, is the thing that keeps the world from tearing itself apart. He looked at Luffy steadily. Is it wrong? Luffy looked at him. He thought about it. Really thought about it, with the seriousness the question deserved, the way he thought about real questions. The idea that people need protecting isn't wrong, he said. The idea that the best protection is to own them, yeah? That's wrong. Aramaki was quiet for a long moment. He turned and walked away from the plateau, back toward the coast, his green coat hanging in its damaged state, the wood dust still settling from where his armor had dried and fallen. He was walking the way he'd walked in, controlled, unhurried, a man who did not hurry because hurrying implied panic, and he was not panicking. He was revising. Deeply, carefully, in the private place where men like Aramaki do their actual thinking. He didn't say anything else. Luffy watched him go until he was over the plateau's edge and out of sight. Then he sat down on the cracked basalt and let the white gold ebb all the way down to the resting warmth. He rolled his shoulder, the sea stone catch from yesterday, sore still, and looked at the enormous sky above the plateau. It was mid-afternoon. The clouds were doing something interesting. The grass beyond the basalt moved in the wind, silver-green, wave after wave of it. He was alive. He was more than he'd been this morning, which was more than he'd been the morning before that, and so on backward to the nameless island and the dying warrior and the fruit that tasted like lightning. He thought about Cayenne. He thought, I'm using it. The way you wanted. I promise. He got up. Went back to the harbor. Went back to the sunny. Nami was at the dock with her arms crossed and the look. How is it? She said. Fine, he said. Fine. Fine. He walked past her up the gangplank. He's not coming back. The 5 elders, I know. He stopped at the top of the gangplank. Turned around. She was below him, looking up with the expression that held everything she was, the intelligence, the concern, the commitment so deep it didn't need to announce itself. Nami. What? We're going to win, he said. Simple. Honest. The way he said things that were true. She looked up at him. You sound very sure, she said. I am very sure. Why? He looked at his crew on the deck behind him, Zoro sharpening a blade, Sanji cooking, Usopp drawing, Chopper reading, Robin with her book, Frankie tinkering, Brooke playing something soft. All of them. All of it. The warmth of it like a second sun. He looked back at Nami. Because I've got you, he said. Nami stood at the bottom of the gangplank and looked at him and didn't say anything for a moment. Then she walked up the gangplank and shouldered past him onto the deck and said, The route to the next island is already plotted. We leave in an hour, and someone needs to tell Zoro because he has absolutely no idea what the plan is at any given moment. That's because there's never a plan, Zoro said without looking up from his blade. There's always a plan, Nami said. None of you are aware of it, but there's always a plan. Luffy grinned. He went to steal food from Sanji. Sanji kicked him. He dodged it, which was new. Sanji stared at him. He grinned wider. Everything was exactly as it was supposed to be. Chapter 6. The shore beyond the sky. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Not delivered by marine courier or government official, that would have been too straightforward for what it was. It came attached to a sea bird that nobody recognized the species of, tied to its leg in a case of black wood so fine-grained it looked like compressed night. The bird landed on the Sunny's railing at dawn and waited with the patience of something that had been told to wait, and was going to wait indefinitely. And it was Brooke who found it because Brooke kept odd hours and was playing his violin softly on the upper deck when the bird arrived. He called Luffy. Not the crew. Luffy specifically. The case opened with a mechanism so precise it barely felt like opening, more like the wood simply deciding to become two pieces. Inside was a single sheet of paper, black on one side, written on the other in a hand that was extremely controlled, the handwriting of someone who had decided long ago that everything they expressed would be measured and deliberate, and would leave no room for interpretation. Luffy read it. Robin appeared at his shoulder. He handed it to her without being asked. She read it. "The 5 elders," she said. Quietly. "Yeah." He took it back. "Read it again." He was not a fast reader under normal circumstances, and he read this one slowly, making sure he had all of it. It was not a declaration of war. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was something more unusual, an invitation. A meeting point, specified precisely, an island called Ceres, 7 days north of their current position, a place that the letter described as neutral ground in language that was so carefully neutral itself it communicated clearly that nothing about the situation was neutral. "Come alone," the letter said, at the end. "Or don't come. But understand that the choice you make in the next 7 days determines what happens to the people around you. We are patient. You are not our first concern. The people traveling with you are." Luffy folded the letter. He looked at the sea bird, which looked back at him with the absolute blankness of an animal that has delivered its package and has no further opinions. "Go home," he told the bird. The bird went. Luffy stood at the railing with the folded letter and felt the engine in his chest doing what it always did, turning, warm, patient. He felt the threat in the letter the way you feel weather coming, real, specific, the direction and intensity of it clear even at a distance. He also felt something else. A quality of attention, somewhere deep in the letter's construction, that was not what it claimed to be. The 5 elders didn't invite. They didn't negotiate. That wasn't what this was. This was a measurement. A test of what he'd do with the information. He smiled. "Good morning," he said to no one in particular, and went to find breakfast. He told the crew at breakfast because secrets from the crew were not a category of thing that existed in his world. He put the letter on the table between the food and let them read it, and watched their faces do what their faces did. Nami's jaw set. Usopp's color left him briefly and then returned at a slightly different shade. Zoro read it once, folded it, set it down, and looked at Luffy. Robin read it with the expression she wore when she was thinking 3 things simultaneously, and had decided to fully develop all 3 before speaking. Sanji lit a cigarette. Chopper's eyes went wide and stayed that way. Frankie said something that was almost super but ended differently, a super that had run into something and had to stop and reconsider. Brooke said, "How frightening! Though I must say I have no eyes to see it with, yohohoho." "Brooke," Nami said. "Yes? Please." "Of course." Luffy ate rice while they processed. "They're threatening us," Nami said. Flat. Factual. Doing what she always did, which was strip the situation to its functional truth before letting herself feel anything about it. "Yeah," Luffy said. "Come alone or the people around you become the focus." She set the letter down. "That's not an invitation. That's a leash." "I know. You're not going alone," Zoro said. He didn't look up from his food. "I'm not planning to," Luffy said. Everyone looked at him. "The letter says come alone," Nami said carefully. "I know what the letter says." Luffy ate. "It also says they're patient. People who are actually patient don't write letters about being patient. They just are." He looked around the table. And the 5 elders don't do meetings. They don't invite people. Robin nodded slowly. In 800 years of documented history, the 5 elders have never extended a personal invitation to anyone outside the world government's inner structure. Her voice was careful and precise. This is not how they operate. So it's a trap, Usopp said. Or they're scared, Luffy said. The table went quiet. Scared of you? Sanji said. A cigarette balanced on his lip. His voice was doing the thing where it was casual because the thing it was covering wasn't. Scared of what I represent, Luffy said. He set his bowl down. Aramaki went back twice. The Seraphim went back with a report. Every person or thing they sent came back with information that told them the same thing. It's not working, and it's getting less workable every time they try. He looked at the letter. People who are confident in their plan don't change their strategy. They kept their strategy the same for 800 years. A beat. Until now. Robin's eyes were very still. You think they'll come to Ceres themselves? She said. Not quite a question. I think they're going to try to end this in one move, he said. Because every move they make separately gives me another fight, and every fight makes me harder to stop. He looked around the table again. So they're going to bring it all at once. The table sat with this. All at once, Frankie said slowly. All at once, Luffy confirmed. Which means, he picked his bowl back up. We should go. We should go, Nami repeated, in the tone of someone repeating a thing back to confirm they'd heard it correctly, and were giving the universe one more chance to make it not be what it sounded like. 7 days, Luffy said. Good wind, we'll make it in 5. Gives us 2 days on the island before they show up. To do what? Usopp said. Eat, Luffy said. Sleep. He grinned. Be ready. The 5 days of sailing were the quietest the Sunny had been in recent memory. Not tense. The Straw Hats didn't do sustained tension well as a collective, because Usopp always eventually said something, or Chopper got excited about a fish, or Brooke started playing something that made tension seem structurally unsound as a long-term position. But quieter than usual. A quality of presence to the days, like each one was being paid attention to. Luffy trained every morning. Not with the crew, alone, on the upper deck before anyone else was up, in the blue-gray before dawn doing the breathing and the channeling and the precise focused work of someone who was taking an instrument they'd recently discovered and learning its full range. The white gold was accessible now without the trigger of a fight. He could call it deliberately, hold it, direct it, sustain it. It had become vocabulary rather than weather, something he spoke rather than something that happened to him. On the 3rd morning Zoro joined him without asking. He didn't do the breathing. He did his own thing, the training that was Zoro's, the sword work and the weight and the meditative suffering that he built into something both ascetic and ferocious. But he did it beside Luffy, in the same space, in the same before dawn, and the two of them working in parallel was its own kind of conversation. On the 4th morning, Robin joined them. Then Sanji. Then Nami, doing weather readings but staying in the space of the thing rather than going below with her charts. Then Chopper, who sat on the upper deck railing and watched with his hooves folded and his eyes very open. Then Frankie, then Usopp, then Brooke, who played something very quiet and without lyrics that was exactly right for the quality of those mornings. Nobody talked about it. It just became the morning thing. The thing they did before the day started. On the 5th morning, before Ceres appeared on the horizon, Luffy stood on the upper deck in the full white gold and looked at his crew around him, each of them, in their morning thing, doing their particular version of preparation, and felt the largeness of what they were. Not power. Just them. The specific irreplaceable constellation of these people, built over years of the Grand Line doing its worst, the particular warmth that lived specifically here, on this ship, with these people, that didn't exist anywhere else in the world. He breathed. The gold steadied. Deep, full, quiet. He was ready. Ceres was exactly what the letter had implied, a place designed to mean something rather than be something, chosen for its symbolism over its geography. A flat island. Very flat. Almost suspiciously so, like someone had wanted a stage and had found geography cooperative. White stone beaches, sparse low vegetation, a single mountain that was barely more than a large hill at the island's center, and no permanent population, which the 5-day-old intelligence from Robin's contacts in the Grand Line confirmed. They arrived with 2 days to spare, which Luffy used as advertised: food, sleep, training. The cruise spread across the island with the focused ease of people who had stopped pretending not to know that something enormous was coming, and had decided to meet it prepared. Zoro found high ground on the low mountain and trained there, alone. Sanji cooked. Nami mapped the island obsessively, plotting positions and escape routes, and the sight lines from the beach to the tree-line to the mountain, covering the chart with her precise notation until she had a complete 3-dimensional model of the island in her head. Robin sat on the beach and read and occasionally looked at the horizon with her particular quality of stillness. Usopp and Chopper set up what Usopp called a field operations center and Chopper called a medical station, and which was actually both, a sheltered position behind a rock formation near the beach's eastern curve. Frankie ran equipment checks on the Sunny, anchored in the island's small bay, with the focused attention of a man who loves his ship and is not going to have it damaged today if he can help it. Brook played his violin on the beach, and the music went out over the water, and maybe someone heard it, and maybe they didn't. On the morning of the 7th day, Luffy woke up before anyone else. He sat on the white stone beach in the dark before dawn and looked at the sea and felt the quality of the day the way Nami felt weather, something in the air, a charge, a fullness. The kind of morning that knew what it was going to be. He breathed. The gold came up without effort, easy and complete, the way breathing came easy and complete. "Cayenne," he said, quietly. To the air, to the sea, to whatever part of the fruit still held something of the man who'd made it. "Today's the day." The sea said nothing. The sea was good at that. "I'll do it right," he said. "Like you wanted?" He sat until the sky started changing. Then he went and woke the crew. They came from the sky. Not ships. Not the marine approach of fleet and formation and naval doctrine. The 5 elders came the way people came who had spent 800 years deciding that the ordinary rules of arrival and departure didn't apply to them. 5 figures, descending from above the cloud layer that Nami had been tracking since dawn with increasing alarm, dropping in a configuration that was too precise to be accidental and too unhurried to be an attack. Not yet. This was arrival. Announcement. The particular entrance of people who understood that the first impression of power was often sufficient. They landed on the white stone beach spread across 50 meters, equidistant, each one a different kind of enormous. Not physically, the 5 elders were not physically unusual people. But they carried the weight of themselves in a way that altered the geometry of the space around them, the way certain buildings alter the street they're on just by being the size they are. Behind them, over the horizon, the masts of ships appeared. Marine, dozens of them, hanging back, positioned as a cordon rather than a force. They weren't here to fight. They were here to make sure nothing left. Luffy stood on the beach and looked at all of it. His crew stood behind him. All of them. He hadn't told them to stay back this time. He'd thought about it, the letter, the threat, the calculation about what putting them in danger meant, and then he'd looked at them and understood that behind him was exactly where they intended to be and that suggesting otherwise would have been both futile and wrong. You didn't protect people like this by keeping them out. You protected them by being what you were. The eldest elder stepped forward. He was the one Luffy had read about, the one whose name never appeared in documents, which was itself a name, a declaration that some power had moved past the point of needing to be identified. Old in a way that had stopped corresponding to simple years. His eyes were gold-green, the color of old library light, and they moved over Luffy with the particular attention of someone who had been waiting for this moment for longer than Luffy had been alive. "Monkey D, Luffy," he said. His voice was quiet and absolute. The voice of someone who had spoken in rooms where what they said became true. "Hi," Luffy said. The elder looked at him. "You read the letter?" the elder said. "Yeah. You understood what it meant?" Yeah. And you came anyway. With your crew. He looked past Luffy at the straw hats. Despite the letter's instruction. You threatened my crew, Luffy said. That was the wrong thing to threaten. Something moved in the elder's expression. Not anger. Something older than anger. We are offering you one final opportunity, he said. Stand down. Submit to the world government's authority. The fruit you carry will be studied and contained. Your crew will be handled with consideration for their cooperation. He paused. This is the last such offer. Okay, Luffy said. You accept? No. But I heard you. The eldest elder looked at him. Then he looked at the other four. Something passed between them, no words, no gesture, something more fundamental, the communication of people who had moved past language for certain categories of decision. The four others moved to their positions, spreading out, flanking, the practice movement of people who had done something like this before, long ago, and had not forgotten. The eldest elder looked at Luffy once more. What you are cannot be permitted to continue, he said. I know you think that, Luffy said. It's not a matter of thought. Everything is a matter of thought. Luffy looked at him steadily. You decided, a long time ago, that the world needed to be a certain way. And then you spent 800 years making it that way. And anybody who didn't fit got removed. He felt the engine in his chest, steady and ready, the gold present and waiting. That's the thing about freedom. You can't contain it. You can push it down for 800 years and it'll still be there when the lid comes off, exactly the same as it always was. The elder said nothing. I'm the lid coming off, Luffy said. Everything happened at once. The five elders moved with a simultaneity that said they'd planned this, each one bringing something different, each attack designed to combine with the others, the accumulated power of people who had lived long enough to make their strength into something architectural. Energy, haki, abilities that had no fruit names because they'd moved past names into territories where categories didn't apply. It came from 5 directions at once, converging, everything aimed at the single point where Luffy stood. He went up. Both arms down to the beach, the rocket launch, straight vertical, clearing the convergence point with a fraction of a second to spare, the combined attack hitting the white stone beach where he'd been and leaving a crater that went several meters deep and showed the dark subsoil underneath. From above, he saw the shape of it. The 5 of them. Their positions. The geometry of what they'd built with those positions, and what it was designed to do. He breathed in. Everything. Channel. Open. The white gold detonated. Not from his hands. From all of him, the full expression, the complete thing, the version he touched in the harbor and had been building toward ever since, and it was bigger now, it was what it had been meant to be, the engine at its current ceiling and the ceiling shattering and the next ceiling appearing and that one shattering too as the energy found its own level, which was higher than anything he'd accessed before and still rising. His hair blazed straight. His eyes went luminous beyond the gold he'd been wearing, a white so complete it had warmth in it rather than cold, the warmth of a sun rather than a lamp. The light came off him in waves that were visible, actually visible, rolling outward across the sky in concentric circles like the aftermath of something dropped in still water. The 5 elders, on the beach below, looked up at him. For the first time, perhaps in 800 years, something crossed the eldest elder's face that was not certainty. Luffy came down. Not a punch. Not a single strike. He came down the way he'd always fought when the fight was real, everything, all of it, constant and joyful and completely unafraid. He hit the eldest elder first because the eldest elder was the axis the others oriented around, the center of the geometry, and if you removed the center the geometry failed. The impact was not describable in terms of technique. Terms of technique were for fights where the combatants existed at comparable levels. What Luffy hit the eldest elder with was the complete expression of everything Cayenne had put in the fruit, and everything Luffy had made of it over every fight since the Nameless Island, focused through the understanding of those quiet morning sessions, the channel fully open, delivered with the precision of someone who had been learning how to do this specific thing for weeks. The eldest elder went back. He didn't go down. Luffy hadn't expected him to. These were people who had kept the world under their thumb for 8 centuries, and that required something real, something that didn't break easily. But he went back, sliding across the white stone, the certainty of his face replaced by something that was doing a great deal of rapid revision. The other 4 attacked simultaneously. The crew answered. Not because Luffy asked? Because they were the Straw Hats. Zoro came off the lone mountain like he'd been waiting. Because he had been waiting, positioned there since dawn, watching, biding his time with the absolute patience of a swordsman who understood timing better than almost anything else. He came in at the elder on the left flank, 3 swords, not to beat him. Zoro was not operating under the impression that this was a fight he could win conventionally, but to occupy, to force attention, to make the geometry fail by being in the wrong place for the geometry. Zoro's blades met the elder's power and held for longer than they should have. Zoro's feet moved once. He adjusted. They held again. Sanji came in from the right, a kick that crossed 40 meters in a fraction of a second, Ifrit jam blazing so hot the air ignited behind it. The elder it hit had to redirect fully from the main fight to deal with it. Fully. Which meant Sanji was taking an elder's complete attention, which was not something Sanji had ever done before, and his face, in that moment, knew it. He didn't let it make him slow. He used it. Nami hit the 4th elder from distance, not with power, not with anything that could match what she was targeting, but with precision, with the climb attack doing something she'd developed during the days on Ceres specifically for this, a lightning configuration that came from 3 angles and targeted the one place where the elder's attention was divided. It didn't significantly damage. It disrupted. Made the elder step wide, break their position, come out of the 5-point formation. Robin's arms bloomed across the 5th. The elder who had positioned slightly back, whose role in the geometry was clearly to observe and redirect the others, the coordinator. Robin took coordination apart the way she took everything apart, methodically, completely, with the absolute calm of someone who had survived the worst the world had offered and was still here. Usopp and Chopper kept the perimeter. Frankie kept the Sunny safe. Brook played something that the crew would later not be able to clearly remember but would remember the feeling of, something that made their hands steadier and their breathing easier in the moments when neither was guaranteed. The beach was chaos. Real chaos. The kind that couldn't be summarized or made sequential in retrospect. It existed in multiple places simultaneously, each piece of it requiring total attention from whoever was in it, and the only reason it didn't overwhelm them was that they didn't fight it separately. They were one thing. Moving, breathing, dangerous together, the machine that the Grand Line had built them into over 8 years of exactly this. Every fight and island and impossible situation that had ever tried to break them instead welding them tighter. Luffy fought the eldest elder across the center of the beach, and the crater that their first exchange had made grew, deepened, spread. The elder was extraordinary, not in the way that Aramaki was extraordinary, not trained strength, but the distilled and accumulated power of something that had been alive and deliberate and powerful for so long it had stopped being able to remember what limit felt like. He hit Luffy with things that had no names. Luffy took them. He took every one, and he felt each one run through him and into the engine and out the other side as heat and acceleration and more of what he already was, the Saiyan mechanism in his blood doing precisely what it was built to do, what Kaien had spent 20 years encoding into a fruit for exactly this moment. He took a hit to the chest that would have ended most things and came back out of the shockwave with his hair on fire with white light, and his eyes blazing and his fist already in motion. He took a hit to the arm that numbed it completely, and stretched it out long and rubber, and used the return snap to turn the numbness into force. He took everything. And he came back from everything. He came back from everything laughing. Not the battle cry laugh, the real one, the one that came from somewhere below strategy and above instinct, the laugh that was the laugh of a person who has found the thing they were made for and is in it completely, the laugh that was Nika, was rubber, was Saiyan, was all three and something beyond all three, uniquely and entirely himself. The eldest elder heard it. He stopped. He stood in the ruined center of the white stone beach and looked at the young man laughing in the white light, and something in his face, in the deep old certainty of it, cracked. Not physically. Not in any way visible, exactly. But there was a quality to the crack that was real, that the beach and the sky and the morning registered even if nothing that could be written in a report could. 800 years of certainty meeting something that had no concept of certainty because it had no concept of doubt. Luffy hit him again. The elder went down to one knee. One knee. The other 4 elders stopped. Separately, in their separate fights, each of them stopped and looked at the center of the beach. And each of them saw the same thing, their axis, their center, on one knee on white stone in front of a young man with a straw hat and blazing eyes and not a single gram of fear in his entire body. The eldest elder looked up at Luffy from the ground. "What are you?" he said. The same question Aramaki had asked in the forest on Kova. But the Aramaki version had been a data-gathering question. This was different. This came from somewhere that had stopped being about data. "I told you," Luffy said. "The lid coming off." He reached down. Not to hit. He reached down, and he took the elder by the front of his robe and he lifted him, not aggressively, not as a performance of strength, but directly, the way you lift something to put it somewhere. He set the elder on his feet. And he looked at him. "It's over," Luffy said. "Not you specifically. Not the Marines, not the government, some of that is fine, and you know which parts. But this." He gestured at the beach. "The fight. The cordon of Marine ships on the horizon. The whole apparatus, 800 years of it. This part. The part where you decide for everyone. The part where anyone who doesn't fit gets handled." He held the elder's eyes. "That part is over." The eldest elder looked at him for a long time. He was a man who had operated for centuries from the premise that the world required managing by people equipped to manage it. He had done things from that premise that he had not allowed himself to examine closely because examination was a tool and tools served functions, and the function of managing the world did not benefit from that particular tool being applied to itself. He looked at Luffy and he did not see a pirate. He did not see a threat. He saw something he recognized from a very long time ago, from before 800 years, from the thing that had existed before the world government, before the void century, before all of it. He saw the thing that had made someone, once, decide the world needed managing in the first place. Freedom. Just freedom. Looking at him. Breathing. He looked away first. Something went out of the beach with that look away. A charge, a tension, the architectural pressure that the 5 of them had been holding the space together with. It went out like a lamp. The 4 other elders were still. Not defeated. Each of them had taken damage and none of them were down. The crew had fought well, the crew had fought extraordinarily, but none of them were down. They were still because the center had gone still and they operated around the center. The eldest elder looked at the cordon on the horizon. "Stand down," he said. Quietly. "Carrying." On the horizon ships, signals went up immediately, the communication of an order received, the complex naval semaphore of stand down rippling through the fleet. The beach was quiet. The straw hats assembled, gravitated back toward Luffy the way they always did, the natural physics of the crew reconstituting itself after a battle. There was blood. Zoro had something serious across his left shoulder. Sanji had a burn across his right arm. Nami was moving with a careful quality that said her ribs were talking to her. All of them upright, all of them present, all of them looking at the elder on the beach and at Luffy standing in front of him. "This doesn't resolve everything," the eldest elder said. "No," Luffy said. "The world government is a structure. It doesn't end because one conversation on a beach happened." "I know." Luffy looked at him. "But structures change. Slowly. They change when they meet something they can't stay the same in front of." He looked at the beach around them, the crater, the white stone, the morning light doing something extraordinary with all of it. "You met that today." The elder was quiet. "The Saiyan power," he said. "The fruit you carry." "Mine," Luffy said. Simply. "Yes." The elder looked at him with something that might have been, in a different context, respect. Yes. I can see that. He turned. The other four turned with him. They went back into the sky the way they'd come down from it, unhurried, measured, the departure of people who were not fleeing but were not staying either. Who were going somewhere to do a great deal of thinking. The sky above the beach was open and blue and enormous when they were gone. Chopper went straight to Zoro's shoulder and Zoro let him because the shoulder was actually serious, and even Zoro's relationship with the concept of medical attention had its limits. The crew settled around the beach with the particular post-battle quality of people who had been operating on maximum, and were now coming down, the adrenaline resolving into awareness of specific aches and specific hungers. Sanji had food within 20 minutes. He always had food within 20 minutes. It came from somewhere, provisions from the Sunny, supplemented by something he'd found on the island that morning during what had appeared to be a casual walk but was clearly a larder survey. He brought Luffy's portion directly to him. Set it in his hands. Looked at his face with the direct, unguarded look he only deployed when he decided the moment required him to not be performing anything. All good? Sanji said. Yeah, Luffy said. For real? Luffy looked at his food. At his hands holding it. At the beach around him and the crew in it, and the sky above everything. Yeah, he said. For real. Sanji nodded. Went back to distributing food. Nami sat next to Luffy on the white stone and winced slightly when her ribs adjusted to the new position, and then arranged herself deliberately, and ate, and said nothing for a while. The sea was in front of them, blue and open and going forever in every direction, and the cordon ships on the horizon had changed their configuration, not retreating exactly, but changing, reorganizing, the posture of ships reconsidering their purpose. Do you think they'll actually change? Nami said. Some of them, Luffy said. The ones who can. He ate. The ones who can't won't. But the ones who can, I think something shifted today. Aramaki, she said. He looked at her. He came twice, she said. He fought you twice and came back, and both times he asked questions. She looked at the sea. People who ask real questions can change. People who already have all the answers just keep having them. Luffy thought about this. Yeah, he said. Yeah, that's exactly it. Nami leaned her shoulder against his. Carefully, because of the ribs, but she leaned it there and kept it there and looked at the sea and said nothing else for a while. He let her lean. Zoro appeared on Luffy's other side, shoulder-dressed, Chopper having done his work with pointed comments that Zoro had endured with the pained patience of someone who knows they deserve the pointed comments. He sat. Looked at the sea. The elders, he said. Yeah. That's not the end of it. No. Yeah. They both knew the name. They'd known it since Robin had uncovered its existence. The shadow behind the shadow, the deepest room with the deepest will. The 5 elders were instruments. Extraordinarily powerful instruments, but instruments. What held them was something that hadn't shown itself yet and was going to show itself eventually, because something that had stayed hidden for 800 years didn't stay hidden when the thing it was hiding from became visible enough. When that happens, Zoro said, tell me first. Luffy looked at him. I mean it, Zoro said. Before anything. Tell me first. Okay, Luffy said. Zoro looked at the sea. Satisfied with that. Robin sat on a rock just above them, her book closed in her lap, looking at the water with the expression of someone who has processed a great deal and has arrived at a place of equilibrium with all of it. She'd been thinking since the elders left, the scholar in her running the implications, the historian placing today's events in the sequence of 800 years and estimating where they fell. The void century, she said, to no one in particular, to the morning, to the sea. Whatever they buried. Whatever they were so afraid of that they spent 800 years making sure it stayed buried. She looked at her hands. Today proved they were right to be afraid. Of me? Luffy said. Of what you represent. She looked at him. The thing they buried wasn't a weapon or a secret. It was a possibility. The possibility that the world doesn't need to be what they made it. She looked back at the sea. You're the proof. That's why they came themselves. Luffy sat with this. He thought about Saiyan. The Saiyan engine. The Nika fruit. The rubber body. All of it converging in one person who had eaten a devil fruit without really meaning to at 7 years old, and had spent his entire life refusing to have limits. He thought about the kid on the Fu Sha village cliff watching Shanks sail away. He thought about Ace. He thought about all the islands and all the fights and all the people and all the moments of choosing to get back up, choosing to keep going, choosing to want the thing that everyone said was impossible and treating the impossibility as a detail. Hey, he said. The crew looked at him. I'm going to be king of the pirates, he said. It landed the way it always landed, not as a boast, not as a declaration requiring response, but as a statement of geography. Here is where I am going. The map has been checked. The route is known. Usopp, who had been tending a cut on his arm, looked up and said, Yeah, you are. With the complete certainty of someone who has watched enough evidence accumulate to call the result. Chopper said, Of course. At a volume that startled the seabird. Frankie said super and meant every letter of it. Brooke said, How wonderful! I cannot wait to see it, though I have no eyes to see with. And was cut off by Nami telling him she swore to God and trailing off because she was smiling. Sanji said nothing because his back was to them and he was distributing the last of the food and his shoulders were doing something that would have looked like emotion if you were looking at it, which nobody officially was. Zoro said nothing. He looked at the sea and there was something in his face that was complicated and enormous and old, the look of someone who made a promise at a very young age and has been keeping it ever since, and can feel the keeping of it going exactly right. Nami said, You're going to need a much better map. I have you for that, Luffy said. She looked at him sideways. The morning light on her face. The sea behind her. Yes, she said. You do. They left Ceres in the afternoon, the Sunny moving out of the small bay with the ease of a ship that knew where it was going. The white stone beach went behind them, and the low mountain, and the sky above it all doing what the Grand Line sky always did, too much, too beautiful, too large. Luffy was at the figurehead. He felt the engine in his chest, steady, deep, running its revolution. He felt the white gold sitting available below the surface, the full version now, the complete thing, waiting in the way that real power waits, which is patiently and without anxiety. He felt where he was and where he'd been and the distance between those 2 points. He also felt where he was going. Not specifically. Not the address and the timeline. But the direction, clear, certain, as clear as the direction he'd always known, as clear as Pirate King, as clear as the sea in front of him, which was blue and open and went all the way to the place where the sky touched down and became something you could sail into. The One Piece was there. In that direction. In the next fight and the next island and the next ceiling to shatter and the next version of himself to grow into. In the next dawn training session and the next stolen food from Sanji's kitchen and the next argument about nothing important and the next moment of looking at his crew and feeling the particular irreplaceable warmth of them. It was all there. He reached for the gold, just a touch, just a greeting, just to feel it, and it came up warm in his hands. He looked at it. At the light it made on the water below. At the way the sea held it, and sent it back, the ocean doing what the ocean always did, which was receive everything and return it changed. Saiyan, he said quietly, to the light in his hands, to the water, to wherever the spirit of a Saiyan warrior went after it was done with its work. Still moving forward. He closed his hands. Opened them. The light was still there. Of course it was. He laughed, the real one, the full one, the one that was Nika and Rubber and Saiyan and Luffy, all 4 of those things at once, exactly the same as they'd always been and completely new. The Thousand Sunny moved. The sea moved. The world moved. And somewhere ahead, still unclaimed, still burning and impossible and absolutely his, the future waited for him to arrive.